Hey guys, tonight we're going all in on Greek mythology. A sprawling, messy, often contradictory collection of stories about gods who act like drama queens, mortals who make consistently bad choices, and monsters who are probably just misunderstood. We're starting at the very beginning, the true beginning, before there were gods, temples, or even that one weird phase where Zeus kept turning into animals. This is the part of the story where you realise you probably won't survive this. But hey, that's fine. Most mortals in Greek myths don't, and the ones who do usually regret it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin not on Earth, but in absolute nothingness. There's no sky, no stars, no TikTok sound loops echoing through the void. Just you, floating in total silence. This is chaos. And not the action movie kind with explosions and slow-mo, but the ancient Greek concept of a raw, yawning nothing. No time, no light, just an endless, shifty darkness with no sense of direction. You can't breathe, but you don't need to. You're not really you yet, you're just awareness. A floating point of consciousness waiting for something to begin, and then, like a crack in black glass, something stirs. A gentle shiver through the nothingness. First comes Gaia, Earth herself, not a planet, but a living, breathing force of nature. She doesn't arrive with a bang or a dramatic theme song. She simply is, suddenly, and now everything has something to stand on. She stretches out below you, mossy and maternal, strong and strangely smug. You can feel that she's patient but already a little annoyed. It's the vibe of someone who knows she's going to have to do all the work. Next pops in Tartarus, a dark, yawning chasm beneath the earth. He's less a god and more of a grim concept, like a bad dream wrapped in the smell of damp stone and echoes that go too long. You drift near the rim of it and feel it tugging at your soul like a debt you didn't know you owed. Not a fun place. Then there's Eros, the primordial version. Not the winged baby with a bow, but a cosmic spark of desire. Not romance, we're not there yet, but the urge to become. He zips it around like a golden blur, colliding with things, whispering "do it" before chaos was even cool. You get the feeling he's the reason Gaia starts, reproducing. Also appearing early are Nyx the night and Erebus, the darkness within shadows. Yeah, the Greeks really leaned into the "it's moody, therefore it's mythologically powerful" thing. Nyx is this tall, elegant presence with a face made of stars and a long, endless cape of starlit void. Erebus just kind of skulks around her like a shadow you can't shake, quietly supporting her whole aesthetic. All of them emerge from chaos, and none of them are particularly concerned about your existence. Still, it's fascinating to watch. Gaia, unbothered and fertile, gives birth to Uranus, the sky. Not in the biological way. We're still in metaphor territory, but Uranus stretches over her like a blue velvet ceiling full of promise. Unfortunately, he turns out to be the first in a long line of bad husbands in Greek mythology. You see, Uranus doesn't just cover Gaia, he smothers her, obsessed with control. He forces her children, the Titans, deep into her body, trapping them inside the earth. They scream, they struggle, but Uranus presses down harder. It's claustrophobic, you feel it in your bones. But Gaia's not about to let that slide. She's patient, but she's not passive. One night, as Uranus relaxes, probably after a long day of cloud stretching, Gaia reaches into herself and pulls out a sickle, a jagged, divine blade forged from nothing but her own resolve. She gives it to her bravest son, Cronus, a titan with sharp eyes and sharper ambition. The next part? Yeah. Cronus waits until Uranus descends to cover Gaia again, and then he ambushes his dad. With one swift slash, Cronus castrates Uranus and flings the, sky junk into the sea. It foams, it churns, and out of it rises Aphrodite, goddess of love, fully grown and completely unbothered. Greek mythology, everybody. You gotta love the commitment to weird reproductive symbolism. And as Uranus bleeds into the stars, Cronus becomes king. He's crowned by default. The other Titans celebrate, thinking maybe this new era will be chiller. Spoiler, it won't. Cronus inherits all his dad's paranoia and very little of Gaia's patience. Here's a weird but real twist. Nyx, remember her? The night goddess. She starts giving birth to whole concepts. Hypnos, sleep. Thanatos, death. Momus, sarcasm. And Oises, misery, among others. It's like her womb is a high-speed factory of vibes. Some ancient sources even credit her with giving birth to the Fates, which is a massive flex if true. But scholars debate that. Some say the Fates are older, even more primordial. Others say they're daughters of Zeus. Classic mythology move. Give every major figure at least 3 conflicting origin stories. By now you're drifting through a new kind of cosmos. Stars begin to hang in the sky. Rivers cut across Gaia's skin. Light exists. So does pain. It's beautiful and terrible and far too dramatic for a Tuesday night. But that's how Greek mythology works. It doesn't ease you in. It throws you into a cosmic soap opera where everyone has powers and no one goes to therapy. You're still hovering just above Gaia's mossy, god-spawning skin when things start to get weirdly domestic. Cronus has just overthrown his dad with a divine sickle and a complete lack of boundaries, and now he's in charge. He walks around with this grim, authoritative look on his face, like a high school principal who caught everyone skipping gym. The Titans, his brothers and sisters, act chill about the whole thing, but you can tell they're watching him. Too quiet, too polite. They've seen what happens to a parent in this family, and they're not about to get comfortable. Cronus, for his part, doesn't really know what he's doing. He's like a new manager trying too hard to look competent. His first decree? Let's make a family. He finds his sister Rhea, and because Greek mythology has never heard of a family tree that doesn't loop back on itself, he marries her. You're not sure if Rhea's into it, or just following the script, but they start popping out divine kids like it's their full-time job. First comes Hestia, goddess of hearth and home. She's warm and quiet and always smells like fresh bread. Then Demeter, goddess of grain, who immediately starts organising Gaia's crust into fields and harvests. Then Hera, who even as a baby looks like she's judging you. Then Hades, broody and sharp-eyed, followed by Poseidon, born with salty waves in his hair. And finally Zeus, loud, bright-eyed, and way too confident for someone whose head isn't fully shaped yet. But Cronus, he's sweating. You see, there was a prophecy, because of course there was, that said one of his children would overthrow him, just like he did to Uranus. Now, a smart ruler might take steps to ensure loyalty, maybe raise his kids with love, maybe communicate, maybe enroll in divine therapy. Not Cronus. His solution is straight up panic-eating his children like divine Pringles. It happens fast. Rhea gives birth, and before the kid can even open its mouth to cry, Cronus gulps them down whole. No chewing, no seasoning, just straight to the gut. Hestia, swallowed. Demeter, gone. Hera, down the hatch. Hades and Poseidon follow, probably wondering what the heck is going on. Inside his stomach, the 5 siblings just kind of hang out, fully conscious, stacked like divine nesting dolls, because immortality means nothing if not awkward digestion. Rhea naturally is over it. You feel her seethe as she clutches her 6th child, Zeus, to her chest. She's tired of being a baby vending machine with no say in the matter. So she pulls a classic trickster move. She wraps a rock in swaddling cloth and hands that to Cronus, who, true to form, snacks on the stone like it's a midnight burrito. Doesn't even notice the weight's different. Meanwhile, Rhea smuggles the real Zeus off to Crete, where a cave becomes his nursery, and a group of mythical bodyguards called curates do interpretive dance battle routines to mask his crying. You're not making this up. These guys literally clang swords and shields to hide baby Zeus's screams. It's the ancient version of putting on white noise for sleep, if your white noise machine also did karate. The cave is damp and echoey, filled with the scent of moss and goat fur. Speaking of goats, Zeus's nanny is Amalthea, a divine goat who feeds him her milk and gives him her horn, literally, when she passes, creating the cornucopia or horn of plenty. Every time you see one of those in Thanksgiving decor, remember, it's goat-based, and Zeus probably chewed on it as a teething ring. As Zeus grows up, he starts hearing whispers, that he's not an orphan, that he has siblings inside his dad, that maybe, just maybe, he's got a divine destiny. One night, as the stars blink overhead and a wind rattles the mouth of the cave, Zeus looks up and decides, yeah, he's going to free his family and take over. No therapy, just vibes and vengeance. To do that, though, he needs backup. He travels across Gaia's expanse, meeting others who have no love for Cronus. First up, Métis, tightnesses of wisdom. She's clever and low-key terrifying. She mixes Zeus a potion, something bitter and bubbly that looks like it came from a mythical Whole Foods, and instructs him to offer it to Cronus like a peace drink. Zeus returns to Cronus's court, now a pompous, crumbling palace perched atop Mount Othrys, and poses as a loyal servant. You can almost hear the tension when he bows and hands over the cup. Cronus, tired and bloated, drinks. At first, nothing. Then boom! Divine indigestion. One by one, Cronus vomits up Zeus's fully grown siblings like divine matryoshka dolls. First Hestia, dazed but composed, then Demeter, shaking the grain from her hair, Hera already scowling, Hades blinking in the sudden light, and Poseidon damp and cranky. They're all here, reborn, and furious. This marks the start of Titanomachy, the 10-year war between the old gods, the Titans, and the new kids on Olympus. The battlefield is Gaia's own back, split between Mount Othrys and Mount Olympus. You get the feeling Gaia's had it with both sides at this point. She's just trying to grow some trees and maybe take a nap. But here's a fringe detail the myths often gloss over. Zeus doesn't win this war alone. He goes recruiting, like an underdog in a fantasy sports league. First, he frees the Cyclopes, giant one-eyed smiths trapped by Cronus long ago. In return, they gift him thunder and lightning. Real crowd pleasers. Then he frees the Hecaton chairs, monstrous beings with 100 hands and 50 heads each. Scholars still debate what they symbolise. Primordial chaos, natural disasters, ancient writers who got bored halfway through character design. With these allies, Zeus launches a full divine assault. Sky shakes, mountains collapse, oceans boil, the Titans fall one by one either in battle or surrender. Cronus, furious and defeated, is cast into Tartarus, chained in the dark by his own sons. You feel a quiet shift. The age of the Titans is over. The age of Olympus is just beginning. Now that the Titans are officially out of the picture, stuffed into Tartarus like leftovers nobody wants to admit they'll reheat later, it's time for the Olympians to redecorate. The sky still smells faintly of smoke and lightning, and the earth is bruised from the battles, but Zeus is feeling pretty good about himself. He and his siblings gather atop Mount Olympus, which is less of a specific peak and more of a divine high-rise that exists slightly out of phase with reality. You can't climb to Olympus, you vibe your way there. Inside the palace of the gods, everything gleams, the walls pulse with gold and ivory, and the air has that strange mix of ambrosia, lavender, and just a little bit of ego. You float behind the gods as they settle into their new roles like kids picking beds in a very dysfunctional dorm. Zeus, of course, snags the throne. He plops into the central seat, one hand already casually gripping a lightning bolt, the other flipping through a mental to-do list of rules he's probably not going to follow. His first move as king, dividing the cosmos like it's a very awkward family business. He, Poseidon and Hades draw lots. Not exactly a democratic system, but it keeps the fighting to a minimum. Zeus wins the sky, Poseidon gets the sea, Hades, lucky him, lands the underworld. No takebacks. Hestia and Demeter kind of look at each other like, did we just get skipped? But at this point they're used to it. The next few decades, or centuries, it's always vague with immortals, are spent establishing the new divine order. Zeus invites, or forcibly relocates, a whole roster of lesser gods and spirits to Olympus. Some come willingly, others, like the personifications of things like victory, justice, and fair trade, okay, maybe not that last one, show up because they're a part of the cosmic aesthetic. But while Olympus shines bright, not everyone's on board. Some titans still linger, brooding on the fringes of the mythosphere. Most notably, Prometheus, the titan of forethought. He's one of the few who didn't get chucked into Tartarus because he sided with Zeus during the war. He's clever, quiet, and has a weird habit of meddling in mortal affairs, especially when it comes to humans, who are still kind of a side project at this point. This is where things get deliciously awkward. Prometheus helps create humanity from clay. Yep, you heard that right. The ancient Greeks imagined the first humans not as divine accidents, but as artistic projects, sculpted by immortal hands shaped into breathing life. Prometheus moulds them with care. Athena breathes in the soul stuff. The first humans blink into existence, confused, naked, and instantly starting to form opinions. But there's a problem. Zeus doesn't really like humans. To him, they're noisy, messy, and way too curious. He'd prefer they worship from a distance. Prometheus, however, sees potential. He gives them tools, skills, even a moral compass. And in the ultimate act of rebellion, he steals fire from Olympus and brings it to Earth. This fire isn't just literal, it's innovation. Knowledge. TikTok before its time. Prometheus sneaks into the heavens, lights a torch from the eternal flame and carries it down to humanity like the world's most dramatic delivery boy. Zeus is livid. Fire was supposed to be divine property. Watching mortals warm themselves and cook meat like little godlings in training, it grinds his gears. He orders Prometheus to be chained to a cliff in the Caucasus Mountains, and as a bonus punishment, has an eagle show up every day to eat his liver. Why the liver? Because it regenerates. Every single day. And the eagle's got nothing better to do. But Zeus doesn't stop there. Oh no. In the ultimate cosmic revenge move, he commissions Hephaestus, the god's blacksmith, to sculpt a woman. Not just any woman. A breathtakingly beautiful, perfectly curious, deliberately problematic figure. Pandora. He then gives her a jar, yes, originally a jar, not a box, and tells her not to open it, which obviously guarantees she's going to open it. Pandora is sent down to Earth as a gift to humanity, which is Greek mythology speak for divine booby trap. When she finally lifts the lid on her jar, out spill every known misery, disease, death, taxes, middle school embarrassment. The whole kit, only hope remains inside, clinging to the lid like a stowaway. Scholars still debate what this means. Was hope meant to comfort us, or just another trap that keeps us going even when we shouldn't? Either way, Pandora closes the jar and the world is never the same. Meanwhile, back on Olympus, Zeus is starting to show signs of being a bit much. His whole king of the gods routine is going to his head. He enforces Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality, but only when it suits him. He sleeps around constantly, which becomes a recurring plot point in every myth ever. His lovers include goddesses, nymphs, mortals, and at least one swan, which we'll get to later. You watch this play out like a divine reality show with no commercial breaks. Here's something fringe but oddly significant. In some local cults, Zeus wasn't just a storm god. He was worshipped as Zeus Melikios, a chthonic, underworldish version, who received sacrifices at night. Burnt offerings, ghostly rites. This darker version of Zeus complicates the whole sky god image. Some scholars think this points to an older pre-Olympian worship system that later got rebranded. Others just shrug and say it's Greece, they doubled up on everything. Still, you can feel that tension brewing between old powers and new ones, between gods who want order and those who lean into chaos. The stage is set for millennia of divine squabbling, heroic quests, and deeply questionable parenting. And you're right in the middle of it, floating behind gods who don't sleep and mortals who don't listen. So get comfy. We haven't even gotten to the part where Zeus turns into golden rain. You wake up to the sound of baby wailing echoing off the slopes of Mount Dicte. Not mortal wailing. This one's divine. Piercing. Confident. Probably already planning its own revenge. You've arrived at one of the strangest godly upbringings in mythology, and that's saying something. Zeus is still just a divine toddler, hidden away from his father Cronus, who, if you remember, is currently working his way through his children like a buffet of immortal snacks. Rhea, the mum with a plan, has spirited the real Zeus away to Crete, swapping him out with a stone baby lookalike that Cronus swallows without question. Yes, he eats a rock and doesn't notice. This is the level of attention to detail we're working with. So now you're in the goat-smelling, echo-heavy Idaean cave, shadowy and damp, nestled in the mountains, where baby Zeus is being raised in complete secrecy. Rhea didn't just hide him there and hope for the best, she left him in the care of the curates, a wild bunch of armoured dancers who perform an endless routine of clanging swords and stomping to drown out his crying. Picture a combination of battle reenactment and toddler entertainment show, and you're not far off. Also present, Amalthea the divine goat. She's no ordinary nanny. She nurses Zeus with cosmic milk, and one of her horns becomes the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, a magical object that produces endless food, fruit, and maybe the occasional goblet of wine. Honestly, a dream catering situation. Amalthea is loving, shaggy, and massive, and Zeus adores her. But divine childhood doesn't last long. Zeus grows at breakneck speed. One minute he's crawling around chewing on moss, The next, he's a full-grown god with abs, a chin beard, and the stormy intensity of someone ready to topple a regime. You follow him as he leaves the cave, windswept and glowing, on a quiet mission to recruit allies. There's a lot of resentment toward Cronus brewing in the older Titans, and Zeus knows how to pick the ones with grudges. His most important recruit, Metis, Titaness of wisdom and craftiness. She's smart, cool under pressure, and totally not into Zeus romantically, which makes her almost unique in the mythological HR file. She brews a special elixir, a concoction bitter enough to gag a god. Zeus disguises himself, returns to Cronus's court, and serves the potion with an innocent smile. Cronus, still paranoid but apparently thirsty, downs it, and then, like a godly food poisoning special, it hits. One by one, he vomits up the fully grown children he'd swallowed: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. It's less a medical miracle and more a supernatural reverse baby shower. This is where the drama hits high gear. The gods are free, but they're not safe. Cronus is furious, disoriented, and still powerful. War erupts, an epic, decade-long struggle known as the Titanomachy. Zeus and his siblings, the Olympians, square off against Cronus and the Titans. First, it's not looking great for Team Zeus. The Titans have size, experience, and a serious grudge. They hurl mountains, tear the earth, and shout ancient curses in languages you don't recognize. But Zeus is a tactical god. He frees the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants who forge the god's signature weapons, the thunderbolt for Zeus, the trident for Poseidon, and the helm of darkness for Hades. Each is as dramatic as it is effective. Also joining the fray are the Hecaton chairs, 100-handed giants who fling boulders like baseballs and create miniature earthquakes with every punch. They are pure chaos, and they turn the tide. Eventually Zeus wins. Cronus is dethroned, the Titans defeated and chained in Tartarus deep beneath the earth. But Zeus doesn't stop there. He sets up a new order, a shiny, dysfunctional pantheon atop Mount Olympus, ready to rule in style. Here's the twist. Zeus becomes the very thing he overthrew. You watch him go from rebel hero to micromanaging dad boss faster than you can say eternal patriarchy. He divides the world with his brothers. Poseidon takes the sea, Hades gets the underworld, and Zeus grabs the sky, the clouds, the thunder, and the glory. And just as you're catching your breath from all the cosmic warfare, Zeus starts doing Zeus things. That is, seducing literally anything that moves, or doesn't move, if you're counting statues and clouds. One of his first and weirdest courtships, Danae, a mortal princess. Her father locks her in a bronze tower to prevent a prophecy that her child will one day overthrow him. Solid plan, if not for Zeus's ability to turn into golden rain, yes, actual glowing droplets, that seep through the cracks in her prison and somehow impregnate her. Biology is optional in mythology. Out of this very sparkly, very questionable union comes Perseus, who'll one day slay Medusa and make his own messy mark on mythology. But that's later. For now, Zeus continues his divine conquests, fathering heroes, demigods, and occasional monsters, all while pretending he's the poster god for order. One story that often gets left in the mythological footnotes is the tale of Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. She doesn't live on Olympus, and she's not one for family dinners, but she's always watching. She punishes arrogance, hubris, and especially mortals who think they're equal to the gods. Think of her as the divine reality check. In some versions, she's even the mother of Helen of Troy, yes, the face that launched 1,000 ships, after Zeus chases her in the form of a swan, which leads to the birth of Helen from an egg. You don't get weirder than that. And then there's Themis, another Titaness who wasn't imprisoned after the war. She represents divine law and order, a quiet balance to Zeus's stormy rule. She whispers to him, gives him visions of fate, and occasionally reminds him that lightning bolts don't solve every problem. She's like the conscience of Olympus, though no one really listens to her. Meanwhile, mortals are still bumbling around, trying to understand why it sometimes rains goats or why crops fail after a bad dream. They sacrifice animals, build temples, and invent festivals to keep the gods entertained, or distracted. You drift above one such celebration, the Panathenaea, where mortals parade through Athens in honour of Athena, unaware that the goddess herself is watching from the clouds, judging everyone's fashion choices. So here you are, hovering in the early days of the Olympian regime. Zeus rules the sky, Poseidon broods in the sea, and Hades builds a surprisingly chill kingdom underground. The gods are multiplying, mortals are confused, and the myth machine is just starting to pick up steam. The dust has barely settled from the Titan War when a new problem bubbles up from the underworld. Well, not the underworld, but the suppressed, angsty leftovers of the old regime. Titans may be in Tartarus, but their children and cousins and weird side projects are still lurking. And some of them are absolutely not thrilled about Zeus and his shiny new thunderbolt throne. This, of course, leads us directly into the next major celestial boxing match. The Gigantomachy, the gods versus the giants, and oh, you're not ready for the scale of this chaos. It starts with Gaia. Remember her? Earth Mum? She's still around, and frankly she's had enough of her grandkids flinging lightning bolts and cracking mountains on her face. She'd like a nap, maybe a decade of uninterrupted volcanic peace. Instead, she gets noise, war, and Olympian arrogance. So she decides to level the playing field. Literally. She mates with Tartarus, yes, the prison pit, which should tell you a lot about her taste, and births the giants, a terrifying generation of elemental warriors designed specifically to overthrow Zeus and his cronies. These are not your average big dudes. The giants are massive, serpent-legged, mountain-hurling rage monsters. Some have flaming hair, some have dragon tails, some scream so loudly you can feel the frequency in your ribcage. Their king, Alcyoneus, is basically unkillable as long as he stays on his home turf. And Porphyrion, another standout, develops an extremely unwise crush on Hera, which, spoiler, does not end well for him. As the giants rise, the earth cracks, trees shudder, stars dim. You hover above the battlefield as gods gear up like it's divine WrestleMania. Zeus calls all hands on deck. Hera adjusts her tiara, Poseidon sharpens his trident. Hades, even though he's more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, slips on his helmet of invisibility and creeps into position like a mythological ninja. But here's the catch. There's a divine clause in the prophecy that says the gods can't defeat the giants alone. They need a mortal hero to tip the scales. So Zeus turns to Heracles. Yes, that Heracles, who, despite not being born yet, will eventually become central to the whole Save Olympus operation. Depending on the version, time either wibbles around or the story gets shuffled to fit his future role. Welcome to Greek mythology, where timelines are mostly suggestions. Anyway, the battle is massive. You float through it like a drone cam in a movie trailer. Mountains are thrown like dodgeballs, rivers reverse, fire rains from the sky. Aphrodite wisely just hides somewhere with snacks. Athena takes out Enceladus by throwing the island of Sicily on top of him. That's right. Next time you visit Sicily, know you're standing on a buried giant who's still considered mildly dangerous. Meanwhile, Dionysus, who's either newly deified or already wine-deep, joins the fight wearing leopard skins and hurling his thyrsus, which is just a pinecone-tipped party stick until you realise it can knock out beings the size of buildings. He actually takes out a giant named Eurytus with that thing, which is either hilarious or deeply concerning. Artemis and Apollo, those polished twin divine archers, go full Legolas, picking off giants from a distance. Hecate, the mysterious moon and witchcraft goddess, shows up like a bonus boss with torches and a wall of ghosts. Even the Fates get in on it, clubbing a giant with a bronze cudgel, because when cosmic accountants decide to get physical, it's a bad sign. But the MVP? Heracles. His arrows, dipped in the blood of the Hydra, are the only thing that can kill most of these monsters. With divine backing, he launches shot after shot, each one landing with the force of prophecy behind it. One by one, the giants fall, crumbling into the sea, the earth, or erupting into islands. Scholars often argue whether the Gigantomachy was an allegory for natural disasters, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, or just an excuse to remind mortals why you shouldn't tick off the gods. Both are probably true. The battle ends in victory. For Olympus. Again, the Titans lost, the giants lost. At this point, the Olympians are looking a little smug. Zeus leans back, thunderbolt smouldering, and surveys his empire. Peace, at least for now. Gaia sulks but doesn't retaliate. Yet. You drift through the scorched battlefield, stepping over shattered clubs and piles of scorched serpent tails, wondering how much longer this divine peace will actually last. Because even as they're celebrating, there's a new kind of enemy creeping into the edges of the mythological map of Typhon. But we'll get to him soon. For now, Olympus is stable. Zeus takes it upon himself to reorganize the divine family tree. Some gods get promoted, others are quietly never mentioned again. The Titans who behave themselves, like Oceanus and Mnemosyne, are allowed to chill in retirement, but the rest? Tartarus. Full stop. Oh, and don't forget the minor divinities. The Horae, Seasons, and Moirae, Fates, start getting more involved. Nike, goddess of victory, becomes Zeus's personal hype woman, flying around with wings and golden sandals, handing out divine W's like party favours. Here's a quirky side note. Athens, the city-state, really loved this whole giants versus gods aesthetic. They plastered gigantomachy scenes all over their temples and vases, like a kid proudly drawing their favourite battle scene over and over. Scholars think this was Athens subtly comparing themselves to the gods and their enemies, usually the Persians, to the giants, huge, scary, but ultimately doomed. And one of the biggest debates? Whether the gigantomachy came after the titanomachy in our original myth chronology, or whether they were alternate versions of the same divine power struggle. Some ancient sources blur the lines, and it's possible the battles were fused over time into one long cosmic highlight reel. The truth, like everything in Greek mythology, is layered, reinterpreted, and frequently contradictory. Still, for now, the skies above Olympus are clear. The gods, flush with power, settle into their routines. Festivals begin, oracles murmur, mortals build temples to honour the victory. You drift among them, still invisible, watching as divine order tightens its grip. But even you can sense it. There's always a bigger monster waiting. And this next one has wings, snake legs, and a voice that makes gods tremble. You'd think after hurling mountains, throwing giants into volcanoes, and chaining up the primordial ancestors in Tartarus, Zeus would take a breather. Maybe host a wine mixer or update Olympus's security policy. Nope, this is Greek mythology. Peace isn't part of the long-term strategy. What follows instead is a stretch of Olympus's golden age that looks suspiciously like a divine HR nightmare. Zeus is king now, yes, but instead of ruling with wisdom and restraint, he rules like a CEO who just discovered the firing button and the interns at the same time. It starts with promotions. The pantheon begins filling out like a bloated family tree. Hera, Zeus's sister, becomes his wife, and queen of the gods. You watch her enter Olympus in a slow-motion power walk, veil trailing behind her, eyes scanning the horizon like she's already planning revenge on people who don't even exist yet. She's graceful, composed, and constantly seething under the surface. Hera's job? Marriage, family, childbirth, which is ironic, considering her marriage is a dumpster fire from day one. Zeus, of course, is already cheating. His first mistake? Metis, the titaness of wisdom. You remember her, the one who helped him poison Cronus into barfing up his siblings? She's brilliant, calculating, and unfortunately for her, pregnant with Zeus's first child. A prophecy rolls in. Their child will be wiser than Zeus and overthrow him. And we already know how the gods feel about overthrowing. So what does Zeus do? He swallows Metis whole. Not metaphorically, just straight up consumes her like a protein shake made of existential dread. She's trapped inside him, still conscious, and is still whispering ideas, like a divine Bluetooth headset. Sometime later, Zeus gets a splitting headache. No surprise there. Hephaestus, yes, the blacksmith god, grabs an axe, cracks open Zeus's skull, and out jumps Athena, fully grown, in armour. With a war cry that echoes across the sky, imagine bursting into the world armed, judgmental, and already better at strategy than everyone around you. That's Athena. She brushes the bits of cerebral cortex off her bronze sandals and joins the pantheon without even blinking. Meanwhile, Zeus continues his romantic rampage across the mortal and immortal realms alike. He transforms into everything from a bull to a shower of gold to seduce women who, let's be clear, often have little to no say in the matter. These stories are complicated, uncomfortable and telling. Zeus doesn't so much date, as he descends in a cloud and creates chaos. Each of these unions produces some new demigod or hero, most of whom end up killing monsters, founding cities, or accidentally launching wars. Let's not forget Io, the priestess Zeus seduces and then turns into a cow to hide from Hera, because nothing says love like bovine shape-shifting and international hide-and-seek. Hera, of course, finds out and sends a gadfly to chase Io across continents. She ends up wandering all the way to Egypt, mooing the whole way, before being transformed back into a human and, yes, giving birth to more descendants of Zeus. Your family tree needs a flowchart at this point. You float back up to Olympus and watch the family drama unfold like a mythological soap opera. Hera, furious but strategic, takes her revenge not on Zeus, because that never works, but on the women and children involved. She curses them, transforms them, ruins their lives through very creative means. Her methods range from slow-burning psychological torment to full-on monster deployment. There's a whole subgenre of myths called Hera Finds Out, and none of them end well. And then there's Hephaestus, the god of the forge. Depending on which version you follow, he's either born to Hera alone, her petty response to Zeus's independent baby-making, or the son of both. Either way, when Hera sees he's lame in the legs, she throws him off Olympus. Yes, his mother tosses him like divine garbage. He crashes into the sea, breaks his knees, and is raised by sea nymphs who teach him the art of metalwork. He eventually returns to Olympus, dragging a grudge the size of a mountain, and becomes the god's chief craftsman. Still bitter, still brilliant. Hephaestus crafts palaces, weapons, automatons, even golden thrones that trap people when they sit in them, especially his mum. Zeus later forces him to marry Aphrodite, the goddess of love, which is either poetic justice or a massive troll, depending on how you look at it. Because Aphrodite has zero interest in a marriage of any kind, let alone one to a soot-covered blacksmith with a limp. Speaking of Aphrodite, her birth is its own drama. She doesn't have a mother. She rises from the sea foam where Cronus' severed parts landed. You know the ones, yeah. The ocean bubbles, the foam glistens, and out steps Aphrodite in all her luminous, utterly unattainable beauty. Sea nymphs dress her. The wind makes dramatic entrance music. She's the goddess of love, desire, beauty, and, let's be honest, petty chaos. Everyone on Olympus wants her, but Zeus, ever the strategist, arranges her marriage to Hephaestus, thinking it'll calm things down. It doesn't. Aphrodite immediately starts an affair with Ares, the god of war, whose personality is 90% muscle flexing and 10% growling. They sneak around, whisper behind marble columns, and eventually get caught in a golden net that Hephaestus designs just for this purpose. He invites all the gods to witness their humiliation. Everyone laughs except Hera and Athena, who are so over it they barely glance up from their wine. This is the Olympian workplace now. Affairs, grudges, magical traps, divine birthing from foreheads, and casual cow transformations. Mortals, meanwhile, are down on earth trying to survive locusts and prophecies. They build temples, offer sacrifices, and get visited by gods in disguises asking for directions. Refuse them hospitality. Boom! Your crops fail and your livestock gives up. Welcome to the Xenia Clause, the sacred law of guest friendship, which Zeus oversees with the kind of erratic energy usually reserved for reality TV judges. And tucked between the thunderbolts and betrayals are smaller gods. The Graces, the Muses, Iris, the Rainbow, Messenger, and Hermes, a baby born with sandals, a thief's grin, and a talent for breaking into locked temples. But we'll get to him soon. Here's a scholarly sidebar worth thinking about. Zeus's whole divine reign reflects a shift in Greek society, from an older matriarchal or earth-based system symbolised by Gaia and the Titans, to a newer patriarchal sky-focused order. It's not just myth, it's cultural memory, retold as divine soap opera. Whether or not Zeus ever really ruled the cosmos, he absolutely ruled the narrative. So as you drift among the clouds of Olympus, past golden halls and suspicious whispers, just remember, being a king among gods doesn't mean peace. It just means your drama gets written in stone. You drift quietly now through the upper reaches of Olympus, weaving through cool golden clouds and veils of incense smoke, because tonight we're lingering near the throne of Hera. And let's be clear, she's not in a good mood. Not that she ever really is, but this time it's personal, again. She's the queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, childbirth, women, and, ironically, none of her own relationships are what you'd call stable. You hover near her as she sits stiff-backed, regal, with a look that could freeze fire. There's a distant crash of thunder, which probably means Zeus is off doing something he shouldn't be. Again, Hera's stories almost never begin with her. They begin with Zeus doing what he does best, sneaking around in disguise, seducing mortals, nymphs, goddesses, anything with a pulse, and occasionally things without. Hera finds out. She always finds out. And instead of smiting her husband, because he's got that whole king of the gods immunity package, she redirects her rage to the nearest available target. You've probably heard about Semele, the Theban princess. Zeus falls for her, naturally, and visits her in secret, cloaked in shadows. Semele, young and enchanted, doesn't realise how high she's flying, until Hera dropped in, disguised as a kindly old woman, whispering doubts. "If he's really Zeus," she murmurs sweetly, "why doesn't he show you his true form?" Semele, convinced, begs Zeus to reveal himself. He tries to say no, he really does, but she insists, and bound by divine oath, he shows her the full god mode: lightning, storm clouds, thunder and stereo. Semele is instantly incinerated, just poof, but she's already pregnant with Dionysus, so Zeus rescues the unborn baby and sews him into his thigh. Yes, his thigh. 9 months later, Dionysus is born a second time from Zeus's leg, crying and glittery, and Hera, she adds it to the list. Then there's Io, another mortal caught in Zeus's relentless orbit. Hera walks in just as Zeus turns Io into a cow to avoid detection. Hera, not buying it, demands the cow as a gift. Zeus hands her over. Then Hera assigns Argus, a giant with 100 eyes, to guard Io. Argus never sleeps, he just rotates which eyes are closed. Zeus sends Hermes to help. The messenger god tells Argus a story so long and boring that all 100 eyes close. Hermes kills him, Io escapes, but Hera plucks Argus's eyes and places them on her favourite bird, the peacock. You'll never look at those feathers the same way again. You keep drifting through Hera's stories and see a pattern: betrayal, revenge, repeat. Callisto, a nymph and one of Artemis's virginal followers, is seduced by Zeus in the form of Artemis herself. Callisto becomes pregnant, is banished by Artemis, and then turned into a bear by Hera. Later, her son nearly kills her in a hunt, and the gods finally take pity, transforming them both into constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Hera, in a final salty move, asks Poseidon not to let their stars dip below the horizon. That's why the Big Dipper never sets. Cosmic pettiness, on a galactic scale. And then there's Heracles. You would think the guy's name, literally meaning glory of Hera, might win him some points. Nope. If anything, it makes it worse. Born of Zeus and Alcmene, Heracles is the ultimate reminder of Hera's eternal humiliation. She tries to kill him as a baby by sending 2 snakes into his crib. He strangles them both with his chubby little fists, so she waits, watches, plots. Later in life, Hera drives Heracles mad, causing him to kill his wife and children in a frenzy. As penance, he's given 12 impossibly brutal labours, many of which Hera directly engineers to be extra miserable. She sends the Hydra. She supercharges the Nemean lion. She tries to reroute rivers just to ruin one of his cleanup quests. Every time he succeeds, she just adds more rage to her divine filing cabinet. But don't get the wrong idea. Hera isn't evil. She's angry. And in the weirdly patriarchal soap opera of Greek mythology, she's often the only one holding anyone remotely accountable. She enforces cosmic laws, guards oaths, and presides over marriage. It's just that her own marriage is the cautionary tale. And let's talk about the wedding. Hera and Zeus didn't start in hate. Their courtship lasted 300 years, depending on your myth. Zeus wooed her in the form of a shivering cuckoo bird. When she held the poor creature to her chest for warmth, boom, he transformed back and proposed. They got married, had a proper divine wedding with ambrosia, nectar, and an impressive guest list. But from day one, it's rocky. Zeus cheats, Hera punishes, repeat until exhausted. Still, she has children of her own. Ares, the god of war, Hebe, goddess of youth, Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, and, depending on the version, Hephaestus. None of her kids are sunshine and rainbows. Ares is aggressive, Hebe spills nectar on the divine carpets, and Hephaestus is, well, literally tossed off a mountain. Ares in particular is Hera's favourite, even though nobody else really likes him. The other gods mock him. Athena finds him crude and his battle record is iffy. But Hera defends him like any mother with a deeply unpopular child. You'll see Ares crash into myth soon, usually shirtless and getting outmanoeuvred by someone smarter. Here's a fringe fact. Some ancient writers hinted that Hera might be older than Zeus in terms of worship. In pre-Olympian myths, she may have been a powerful standalone goddess, later forced into the wife role when Zeus came into fashion. The old Earth goddess married off to the new sky god, a symbolic handoff of power. Scholars still debate it, especially when looking at Hera's fierce independence. She's not a background goddess, she's a political force who happens to be trapped in a myth, where her husband's libido writes most of the plot. So you glide past her marble throne now, watching her listen to prayers from desperate mortals, mostly women, asking for healthy births or protection from their husbands. Hera hears them all. Her answers come slowly, not out of neglect, but calculation. She doesn't grant favours lightly. She remembers every slight, every insult, every poor offering. And you, quiet as a breeze, start to realise that in the storm of divine egos, Hera is the constant, sharp, regal, vengeful but enduring. Queen of the gods not by default, but by sheer refusal to be anything less. You descend from the airy heights of Olympus now, the clouds thinning as you drift toward the crash and roar of waves. Salt sharpens the wind, the sky darkens with a blue so deep it feels endless, and beneath you the sea swells with ancient breath. This is the domain of Poseidon, god of the ocean, earthquakes, horses, and general moodiness. He's not lounging on a beach or sipping anything from a coconut. No, Poseidon is always on the move, stalking the seafloor, dragging his trident through coral, occasionally cracking the crust of the earth like it personally offended him. Unlike Zeus, who rules the sky like a grandstanding mayor, Poseidon operates more like a storm. You don't see him coming, but you definitely feel when he arrives. And oh, do the mortals feel it. A little too much thunder, and you might panic. But when Poseidon twitches, whole cities vanish under waves. He doesn't rule with laws, he rules with moods. You find him now in his vast underwater palace near Aegae, built of coral and gems, glowing faintly in the deep. Fish the size of boats drift by. Sea nymphs, nereids, flit through the halls like silk ribbons. Dolphins leap alongside his chariot, which is pulled by hippocamps, half-horse, half-fish creatures that snort salt water and splash like a cross between majestic and slightly ridiculous. Poseidon himself is towering, beard tangled with seaweed, muscles rippling like tide currents, trident always nearby. His eyes flick with flashes of stormlight. He's got charisma, sure, but also the temper of someone who hasn't forgiven a parking ticket from 500 years ago. You hover close as he mutters to himself, still salty about a land dispute with Athena. Literally. Ah yes, Athens, the city that could have been named after him. Back when the gods were grabbing up patronage rights like overpriced NFTs, Poseidon and Athena both wanted the same city. So the people held a contest. Each god would offer a gift and the citizens would choose. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident and whoosh, a saltwater spring burst forth. Impressive, dramatic, very on brand, but salty water? Not super useful. Then Athena stepped forward and planted the first olive tree. It offered wood, oil, food and peace, a one-tree economic stimulus package. The people chose Athena. Poseidon naturally threw a tantrum. Some say he flooded part of the city in revenge. Others claim he just sulked in his undersea lair for a century. Either way, Athena won, and Poseidon's never let it go. Still, he collected his own worshippers, especially among sailors and coastal cities. Corinth, for example, loved him. So did Delos. Mortals carved his likeness into ships, offered bulls in his name, and prayed like their lives depended on it. Which honestly they did. One bad storm and you're Poseidon's appetizer. But beyond the sea, Poseidon also held domain over horses. Strange, right? Sea god, horse guy. But it all connects. In some myths, he created the first horse from sea foam. In others, horses are tied to his stormy nature, fast, wild, untamable. He's even credited with fathering Pegasus, the winged horse after Medusa's head was lopped off. That's right, Pegasus didn't come from eggs or divine cloning. He sprang fully formed from Medusa's severed neck because Poseidon had at one point been with her. In a temple of Athena. You see how this family keeps things messy. Poseidon's romantic resume is, let's say, aggressive. His lovers include goddesses, nymphs, mortals, and more than one unfortunate mortal woman who had very little say in the matter. One well-known case, Amymone. When she was cornered by a satyr, Poseidon rescued her, but only after making his own demands. In return, he gave her a spring of fresh water to help save her drought-ridden land. Classic divine transaction. And then there's Demeter, his own sister, whom he pursued relentlessly until she disguised herself as a mare and hid among horses. Did Poseidon take that as a no? No. He turned into a stallion, found her, and their union produced Arion, a talking horse with immortal hooves. Again, biology takes a backseat to plot. Poseidon's children are as chaotic as he is. Some are great heroes, like Theseus, the Minotaur-slaying prince of Athens, possibly Poseidon's son depending on the version. Others? Absolute nightmares. Polyphemus, the Cyclops who tries to eat Odysseus' crew, is a child of Poseidon. When Odysseus blinds him, Poseidon holds a decade-long grudge and makes sure Odysseus' return trip becomes a slow-burn disaster. Just imagine Poseidon sitting in a divine command center charting storms, placing sea monsters, flipping Odysseus' boat upside down like a bored kid with a fish tank. In fact, earthquakes are also his domain. That's why his title isn't just God of the Sea, it's Earth Shaker. In times of war or rage, Poseidon smashes the ground with his trident, splitting valleys and toppling walls. He's the ultimate reminder that no foundation, no matter how solid, is ever truly stable. But here's a fringe story scholars love to puzzle over. Poseidon once tried to overthrow Zeus. Yep. Along with Hera and Athena, he plotted to bind their thunderbolt-happy king brother and take control. It nearly worked, until Thetis, a sea goddess, summoned the 100-handed giant Briareus to rescue Zeus. As punishment, Zeus made Poseidon build the walls of Troy. Yes, the actual walls, which adds a poetic touch when Poseidon later sides against the Trojans in the war. Builds it, then helps tear it down. Chef's kiss. Some local cults even gave Poseidon a darker, more chthonic edge. In parts of Greece, he was worshipped as Poseidon Hippios, a god of underworld horses and buried power. He received black bulls in sacrifice, sometimes even drowned. He wasn't just the guy you prayed to for good fishing, he was the storm under your feet. But here's the irony. Despite all his power, Poseidon was always second to Zeus. No matter how many temples he claimed or monsters he fathered, he never sat in the throne room as king. That bitter undertone hangs in the water. Even his waves feel like they're gnashing their teeth. And yet, mortals keep calling on him, sailors with salt-burned lips, farmers praying for rain, warriors shouting his name before battle. Because Poseidon isn't just the sea, he is the emotion you can't control, the rage, the awe, the way your heart beats too fast when the earth shakes. So you drift away from the crashing tides, through the crash and hiss of waves against rocky shores, Poseidon still pacing his watery palace below, trident in hand, always just one mood swing away from rewriting the map. Now the air cools, the light fades, and everything around you shifts from blue and gold into layers of grey. The wind stills. There's a hush, like the world is holding its breath. You're not in Olympus anymore. You're descending, slowly but steadily, into the realm of Hades, god of the underworld, ruler of the dead, and easily the most misunderstood sibling in the divine family tree. He's not evil. Let's start there. Hades isn't the devil, no matter how many Renaissance paintings try to squeeze him into a red cape. He doesn't run a torture chamber or tempt mortals into sin. His job is administration. Cold, necessary, and impossibly vast. He's the CEO of the afterlife, the eternal record keeper. When you die in Greek mythology, Hades doesn't cackle. He just files your paperwork. You pass through the veil that separates the mortal world from his domain, a crossing marked by chill air and that uncanny feeling that someone just walked over your grave. The river Styx glimmers in the distance, black and slick like oil. Souls cluster along its banks, pale and whisper-thin, waiting their turn. Some sob, some stare, some shuffle in resigned silence. No one rushes. There's nowhere else to go. The boatman, Charon, ferries them across, grumbling in an eternal overtime mode. He doesn't speak unless spoken to, and even then, it's more sigh than sentence. Mortals place coins, obols, in their mouths or on their eyes at burial to pay him. You don't have any coins, but you're not really here physically. You drift over the boat, over the water, weightless, unseen. Across the river lies Asphodel Meadows, the default neighbourhood of the afterlife. Most souls end up here. Not punished, not rewarded, just existing. The landscape is a little sad, a little foggy, the eternal version of a waiting room with no magazines. It's not hell, but it's definitely not the resort package. The good place, Elysium, is off to the side, shining faintly like an exclusive VIP section you can only enter by invitation. The bad place, Tartarus, sinks deeper below, where the worst offenders are locked up for eternity under the watch of the Hecaton chairs and some creatively cruel punishments. And overseeing it all, far below Olympus, and far above total despair, is Hades. He sits in a cold throne carved from obsidian, dressed not in armour or gold, but in deep black robes. His face is pale and serious, with eyes that don't just look at you, they weigh your existence. Unlike Zeus, he doesn't posture. Unlike Poseidon, he doesn't storm. Hades just is, unshakable, unflinching, necessary. His palace is eerily quiet. No laughter, no music, just the soft sound of river water, distant wails, and the occasional growl from Cerberus, his three-headed guard dog who lounges at the gates like a furry gatekeeper from your worst nightmares. Each of Cerberus's heads watches a different direction, past, present, future, and none of them are friendly. Here's the part the myths don't always agree on. Hades' love life. His most famous relationship is with Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. According to the traditional version, Hades sees Persephone picking flowers one day, bursts up from the earth in a chariot, and snatches her down to the underworld. Not great optics, but the story gets more complicated the deeper you go. Demeter is devastated. She scours the world looking for her daughter. Crops die, fields wither. Humanity begins to starve. The gods plead with her to end the famine, but she refuses until Persephone is returned. Finally, Zeus steps in, not because he's moved by suffering, but because he realizes if mortals die out, there'll be no one left to worship him. Priorities. Hades agrees to return Persephone, but not before slipping her a snack. Just a few seeds. Pomegranates specifically. And because ancient laws are weirdly specific, anyone who eats food in the underworld is bound to it. So Persephone is allowed to leave, but only for part of the year. She returns to Demeter in spring and summer, bringing life and bloom with her. In autumn and winter, she descends once more to Hades, and the world sleeps. That's how the Greeks explained the seasons, with grief, return, and compromise. But here's the scholarly debate. Was Persephone truly abducted, or did later versions soften the story to align with changing ideas of marriage and female agency? In some older myths, Persephone chooses to stay. In others, she rules beside Hades as an equal. Some cults, particularly in Eleusis, even worshipped her as a queen of renewal and resurrection. Less a victim, more a cosmic keyholder. Regardless of the version, Persephone's presence softens Hades. He's never warm exactly, but there's a change. He listens more, walks the quieter halls of his palace, even allows flowers, dark ones sure, but still, and the souls, they feel her return each year like a sigh of relief. She brings a little light to the dark. Hades' other moments in mythology are rare but powerful. He lends his helm of invisibility to Perseus to help kill Medusa. He allows Orpheus, the lyre-playing poet, to venture into the underworld to retrieve his wife Eurydice. That story, by the way, does not end well. Orpheus, told not to look back until they've both exited the underworld, naturally looks back one step too early. Eurydice vanishes. Again, Hades never even says, "I told you so." Another little-known fact. Hades had a side chariot business. Okay, not officially, but some myths describe him as possessing a magical chariot drawn by black horses that could traverse any terrain, even surface and shadow. Mortal kings and seers occasionally called on him. Not often, and not casually, but when they did, it was a big deal. Despite ruling over the dead, Hades isn't associated with decay or corruption. That role goes to Thanatos, the god of peaceful death, and Hecate, goddess of crossroads and witchcraft. Hades is more about permanence. You die, you stay. No second chances, no resurrections, no deal-making, unless you're Heracles, and we'll get to that soon. What's often forgotten is that the Greeks didn't fear Hades so much as respected him. His name wasn't spoken casually. Even saying Hades aloud was seen as risky, so they'd use euphemisms like Pluton, meaning the wealthy one, a nod to the belief that all riches, metals, gems and bones came from beneath the earth. You want to honour him? Speak softly. Sacrifice with clean hands. And never, ever enter his realm thinking you'll just pop in and out. So here you are, floating through this shadowed world surrounded by silence and the weight of eternity. There are no fireworks here, no heroic music or golden light, just quiet stone and a god who never leaves his post. And strangely, that brings comfort, because even in the chaos of mythology, someone has to keep the final gate. There's a shift in the air now, not just the mood, but the temperature itself. A subtle drop, like autumn whispering through a field of dry wheat. The ground beneath you turns gold, then brittle, then brown. You're pulled gently up from the shadowed stillness of Hades' realm into a world caught between warmth and wither. You're entering the realm of Demeter, goddess of grain, agriculture, fertility and quiet fury. She's not like the Olympian elites with their flash and ego. Demeter is quieter, older in her bones. She doesn't need to shout. The earth speaks for her. Every stalk of wheat, every bud of barley, every ripe olive clinging to a branch, that's her language. When she's pleased, the world flourishes. When she's grieving, nothing grows. Simple as that. Right now, she's grieving. You arrive during one of her worst moments. Her daughter Persephone has vanished, snatched by Hades, as we touched on before. And no one's told Demeter. Not Zeus, not Hermes, not even Gaia, who definitely noticed when the underworld cracked open like an elevator to nowhere. Demeter wanders the world in disguise, barefoot, hair unbraided, wearing the sorrow of every mother who's lost a child. She doesn't scream, she doesn't curse, she simply walks, and as she does, the crops begin to die. She visits kings and peasants, passes temples where no one recognizes her. Eventually she reaches Eleusis, where she takes refuge with a royal family. Disguised as an old nurse, she tends their baby, Demophon. She loves the child and in her grief tries to make him immortal. She holds him over a fire each night to burn away his mortal skin. A common bit of divine spa treatment back then, but the child's mother walks in one night, sees her son roasting like a marshmallow and screams. Demeter drops the act. She grows 10 feet tall, glows like sunrise over a battlefield, and demands a temple be built in her honour. The family, now very much on board, complies. This becomes the foundation of the Eleusinian mysteries, one of the most secretive and sacred rites in ancient Greece. What happened during the ceremonies? No one knows. The initiates swore lifelong secrecy, but it involved Demeter, Persephone, and the promise of life after death. Hope tied to harvest. Meanwhile, the gods on Olympus start to panic. Humanity is dying, the crops won't grow, no grain, no fruit, no offerings, no sacrifices. Zeus realizes, again, that when mortals starve, they stop worshipping. His temples echo with silence, and silence to Zeus is unacceptable. So he sends Hermes to the underworld with a proposal. Let Persephone return. Hades agrees, but there's a catch. We all know it by now, the pomegranate seeds. Depending on the version, she eats them willingly, or he tricks her, or she eats only a few, but once the seeds pass her lips, she's bound to return. That's the rule. The result? A compromise. Persephone will split her time, half with her mother on Earth, half with her husband in the underworld. When Persephone returns each spring, Demeter's joy reawakens the world. Fields bloom, trees bud, birds sing like they're getting paid to do it, but when Persephone leaves again in the fall, the earth goes quiet. Demeter weeps and winter spreads. It's one of the earliest myths to explain the seasons, and it's not about temperature. It's about emotion, grief and reunion, the cycle of loss and return. The Greeks didn't view winter as punishment. It was mourning. Even the land needed time to grieve. But Demeter is more than just a sad mum goddess. She's powerful in her own right. People forget that. She was there before the Olympians, before Zeus's sky rain. An ancient force of nature, rooted in survival. Her wrath isn't flashy. It's famine. No battles, no bloodshed. Just fields of dust and silent barns. That's real power. Here's a fringe fact. Some early versions of the myth suggest Demeter willingly gave Persephone to Hades as part of a political marriage. Later retellings softened this, painting her more as a victim. But in some cults, especially in Arcadia and southern Italy, Persephone is seen not as a captive but as a queen. Demeter's grief becomes symbolic rather than literal. Scholars still argue over this. Was the abduction myth a later interpretation to fit patriarchal norms? Or was the mother-daughter dynamic always central? Like most things in Greek myth, it depends which version survived and which didn't. Demeter also had her own offspring. With Zeus, she bore Despoina and Arion, though the myths vary. With Poseidon, as we mentioned, she had the immortal horse. And there's also Plutus, the god of wealth, born from her union with the mortal Iasion in a thrice-ploughed field. Yes, that's exactly as symbolic as it sounds. Agriculture meets fertility meets divine weirdness. Mortals worshipped Demeter with deep reverence. They built altars in fields, offered loaves of bread and sheaves of barley, and never took her for granted. Farmers knew, without Demeter you didn't eat. Without food you didn't survive. She wasn't glamorous, she was essential. Her influence reached beyond crops. She stood at the heart of family cycles and legacy. Birth, growth, decay, rebirth. All hers. Unlike Zeus, who ruled with ego, or Hera, who ruled with memory. Demeter ruled with the necessity. No one was too powerful to defy winter. Not even gods. And in that quiet stretch between fall and spring, you can still feel her waiting. She doesn't rage, she doesn't beg. She just stands, unmoving, watching the horizon, waiting for her daughter's return. And when Persephone walks back through the fields, petals scattering in her wake, Demeter smiles, and the world is reborn. You feel the hum before you see her, sharp, electric, like tension in the air just before a thunderstorm, or that split second when a thought becomes action. You've risen back up from the fields of Demeter, past the rustle of olive trees and the dusty grain roads of the mortal world, and now you're drifting once again toward the wide marble steps of Olympus. Inside the throne room, it's oddly quiet. The other gods are hesitant, because Athena has arrived. She doesn't walk in, she strides, fully armoured, shield gleaming, spear clisking against the marble with each step, and no one says a word, not because they're afraid, though some definitely are, but because Athena commands a level of respect rare among the gods. Not born of power alone, but of intellect, of precision. She's not just a war goddess, she's strategy, the one who thinks 5 moves ahead while Ares is still flexing in a bronze mirror. Let's rewind a bit. Athena's birth, already iconic. Zeus swallowed her mother, Metis, the titaness of wisdom, to avoid a prophecy that said their child would surpass him. And for a while everything seemed fine. No toddler kicking Zeus's ribs from the inside, just a quiet headache. That turned into a migraine, then a skull-splitting pressure so intense that Zeus begged Hephaestus to do something. And by something, he meant open his head with an axe. Cue the crack of divine bone, and boom, Athena bursts out fully grown in full armour, shield in one hand, battle cry already echoing across the heavens. No crying, no swaddling, just ready. The gods stare, the world takes a breath. And Zeus, instead of being angry, beams, because somehow she's perfect, his favourite from that moment on. But don't confuse that favouritism for softness. Athena isn't sweet, she's not tender, she's sharp, measured and endlessly calculating. She prefers reason to emotion, debate to destruction, unless war is truly necessary. And when it is, she fights like a surgeon, clean, efficient, ruthless. Her weapons are legendary. The Aegis, a shield bearing the head of Medusa, radiates pure fear. She didn't just slay monsters, she repurposed them. She rides into battle with the power of petrification slung over her shoulder like a fashion statement. Yet for all her might, Athena never marries, never takes lovers. She is, in every myth, virgin, not in the prudish pearl-clutching way, but in the sense of absolute autonomy. She belongs to no one. Her mind, her body, her will, they are her own. She's often grouped with Artemis and Hestia as one of the eternal maidens, but Athena is the only one who leans into it like it's her brand. Mortals adore her, especially in Athens, named for, of course, for her. We touched on the city's origin story earlier, the contest between Poseidon and Athena. While Poseidon offered a flashy salt spring, Athena gifted the olive tree. Food, oil, wood, economy. Not just a gift, but a future. The people voted. She won. Athens became her city, and her temple, the Parthenon, still dominates the skyline thousands of years later. The name, Parthenos, means virgin. You float beside her as she oversees courts, councils, and craftsmen. Athena's reach extends far beyond the battlefield. She's the goddess of weaving, architecture, mathematics, law. She taught mortals how to build ships, spin wool, and lay foundations. If there's a skill that required planning, structure, and a little style, Athena had a hand in it. But not everything she touches ends cleanly. There's Arachne, for instance, a mortal woman, arrogant and impossibly skilled at weaving, who boasted that her tapestries were better than the goddess herself. Athena appears to her in disguise and challenges her to a contest. They both weave. Arachne's tapestry is flawless, depicting the gods' misdeeds, their tricks and scandals. It's not inaccurate. In fact, it's a little too accurate. Athena, torn between admiration and rage, destroys Arachne's work. And when Arachne, crushed with shame, tries to take her own life, Athena intervenes, not to save her, but to transform her into a spider, eternally weaving, every web a thread of warning. Don't outshine the divine, or at least don't be so right about it. Then there's the tale of Medusa, which gets murkier the deeper you go. In the oldest versions, Medusa is simply a monster, but later myths tell of a mortal priestess in Athena's temple, beautiful and chaste, who is assaulted by Poseidon, right there in the sacred space. Instead of punishing Poseidon, classic, Athena transforms Medusa into a gorgon, giving her a head full of snakes and a stare that turns men to stone. Was it punishment or protection? Was Athena complicit or vengeful on behalf of a defiled temple? Scholars still argue. The feminist reinterpretations lean toward the latter, a brutal divine empowerment born from violation. Athena doesn't apologize. Ever. She doesn't cry in myths. She doesn't beg. She makes decisions and lives with them, sometimes brutally. But she also protects heroes, particularly the clever ones. Odysseus, her favourite. The guy survives war, cyclopes, sirens, and petty gods largely because Athena likes his brain. She advises him, hides him, even bullies other gods on his behalf. You see her now perched on a marble balcony, gazing down at a mortal battlefield. Not fighting, not shouting, watching, calculating, ready to turn the tide with a whisper or a single well-placed word. That's Athena's power. Control without chaos. Order in the face of divine impulsiveness. Even the other gods tread carefully. Ares, god of bloodlust, might swing wildly and call it war. But Athena, she's the one who ends it. With strategy, with diplomacy, with that infuriating look that says she's already thought 3 outcomes ahead of you. And mortals, they pray to her before exams, before court cases, before any act that requires thought over force. She's the goddess of the mind, but not just thought. Thought with teeth, intellect as weapon, logic as shield. Here's something you won't find on many vases. Athena may have been worshipped originally as a fusion of earlier goddesses. Some theories claim she was once a Cretan bird goddess. Others tie her to ancient war deities. Her symbol, the owl, links her to night vision. Not just literal, but metaphorical. Seeing what others to miss. Wisdom in darkness. So you float now in her wake, among the scrolls and weapons and endless plans. No lovers to chase. No children to raise, no throne to share. Just the fierce independence of a goddess who was born from thought, who breathes calculation, and who, more than anyone, reminds you that in the myths of gods, it's not always strength that wins. Sometimes it's the sharpest mind in the room. You barely have time to admire Athena's precision before the mood shifts, fast and fiery. The sky brightens, the temperature spikes, and a golden glow starts pulsing at the edge of your vision. You're not in the logical hush of battle plans anymore. Now you're somewhere between a sunbeam and a rock concert, where every moment is dialed to maximum. Apollo has entered the scene. He doesn't arrive quietly. He never does. Apollo's the god of the sun, of prophecy, of music, poetry, healing, and plague. Because in Greek mythology, those last two are always weirdly bundled together. He's youth incarnate, radiant, proud, and just a little too into himself. You see him step into the courtyard of Olympus, bow slung across his shoulder, lyre in hand, every curl of golden hair exactly where it should be. He's the kind of god who walks past a mirror and nods like, yes, perfect. Apollo's origin, already dramatic. Born on the island of Delos, alongside his twin sister Artemis, to Leto, one of Zeus's many unfortunate romantic conquests. Hera, in full petty queen mode, had forbidden any land that saw sunlight from sheltering Leto. So Delos, a floating, unanchored island that didn't technically count, was the only safe place. As Leto suffered through labour, the other goddesses gathered, except Hera, who refused to help. Artemis was born first and in some versions immediately helped deliver Apollo, which, if true, makes her the most overachieving newborn in history. From the moment Apollo takes his first divine breath, he's glowing. Everything about him radiates clarity, intensity, and yes, a bit of theatrical flair. He's the god of just enough sunburn to impress your crush and every perfectly timed guitar solo, but don't be fooled, he's not all light and fluff. His temper flares just as hot as his aura. Take his entrance into Olympus. Still a teenager, god years, so like 17,000, he marches up to Zeus and demands a job. He doesn't want a minor gig like seasonal rains or lychee distribution. He wants a domain that matters. Zeus, half impressed and half exhausted by his children at this point, gives him the sun. Well, technically, Helios was already running the solar chariot, but myth timelines are messy. In later traditions, Apollo and the sun become synonymous. Every sunrise becomes a part of his personality, every ray a brag. But Apollo's most iconic role is at Delphi, where he slays the giant serpent Python, takes over her sacred cave, and establishes the Oracle of Delphi, the most famous prophetic site in the ancient world. Mortals travel hundreds of miles to ask questions they already know the answers to, hoping for divine confirmation. Apollo speaks through the Pythia, his priestess, who inhales fumes from a crack in the earth, goes into a trance, and delivers vague, riddle-like answers that could be interpreted 20 ways. You know, just like modern customer service. Still, the oracle becomes his signature. And even when mortals ignore his advice, especially then, he takes it personally. Apollo expects to be listened to, revered, quoted, preferably with a musical accompaniment. Now, let's talk about his music. Apollo's lyre, given to him by Hermes, after a hilarious baby theft situation we'll get to later, becomes his pride. He plays it so well that gods cry and mortals fall into trances. Naturally, this leads to one of Apollo's favourite pastimes, musical showdowns. One famous example, Marsyas, a satyr who found the aulos, a double reed instrument invented by Athena, and got a little too confident. He challenged Apollo to a duel. Big mistake. They play. Apollo, smug and polished, makes the strings weep. Marsyas holds his own with wild, haunting melodies, but Apollo adds a twist. He plays his lyre upside down and demands that Marsyas do the same with his reed instrument. When the satyr can't, Apollo claims victory. Then, because Apollo does not handle losing, or even almost losing well, he has Marsyas flayed alive. That's right, skinned, over music. The next time someone gets snippy about their Spotify playlist, just remember, it could be worse. Apollo's love life, equally intense and just as cursed. He falls in love constantly, often as the result of a prank or divine meddling. Take Daphne, a nymph who wanted nothing to do with him. Apollo, struck by Cupid's arrow, pursues her across the forest. She, struck by Cupid's anti-arrow, runs like the wind. As he gains on her, she begs her father, a river god, to save her. He does, by turning her into a laurel tree. Apollo, heartbroken, claims the laurel as his symbol. Eternal devotion sculpted into bark, very dramatic. Then there's Hyacinthus, a mortal youth whom Apollo genuinely loves. They play discus one day, because that's what Greek gods do when they're flirting. And the wind, or possibly Zephyrus, another jealous god, shifts the discus mid-air. It hits Hyacinthus in the head. He dies in Apollo's arms. From his blood, Apollo creates the hyacinth flower. Sad? Yes. Poetic? Always. And then there's Coronis, a mortal woman who cheats on Apollo while pregnant with his child. Apollo, furious, kills her with a golden arrow. But too late. He regrets it. From her body he rescues the unborn Asclepius, the future god of medicine, and hands him off to the centaur Chiron for training. This story alone contains love, betrayal, death, resurrection, and the invention of surgery, all in a neat tragic bundle. Here's something scholarly to chew on. Apollo's one of the few Greek gods who bridges two extremes. He's the god of healing and plague. His arrows can strike down armies with illness or cure a fever in a whisper. Why? Because the Greeks understood that medicine and sickness came from the same place. You treat the body, but you also fear it. Apollo, more than any other deity, represents that duality, clarity that can also blind. He's also unusually associated with order, not just in nature but in society. Law, music, reason, sunlight. His temples aren't just worship centres, they're libraries, courthouses, record halls. His presence means structure. but not safety, because when Apollo is disrespected, when mortals ignore his prophecies, or gods challenge his ego, his wrath is cold, efficient, and usually irreversible. So you float now through one of his temples, where a chorus of priests hum hymns beneath high ceilings carved with golden lyres. The floor hums with soft energy. Light falls perfectly through slits in the roof. Every note is in place, every voice harmonized. Because this isn't just a building. It's a manifestation of Apollo's vision, symmetry, beauty, and power that demands both awe and obedience. And behind it all, somewhere in the sun's blinding core, Apollo stands, watching, calculating, playing his lyre with fingers that can cure or kill. You don't just follow Apollo, you orbit him. You're still catching your breath from Apollo's sun-drenched spotlight when the atmosphere shifts again. This time dimmer, cooler, quieter. Not dead quiet like Hades' realm, but a gentle hush that settles over the forest at dusk. You're in the woods now, under a darkening sky with crickets just beginning their nightly chorus. A branch snaps beneath you, and a doe bolts. You've entered the territory of Artemis, goddess of the moon, the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, and those unbothered by social convention. She appears just ahead, tall, poised, and wrapped in the scent of pine and sweat and clean mountain air. Her silver bow is always slung across her back, her quiver packed tight with arrows tipped in silence and certainty. Artemis moves like a shadow and stops like a stone. She's the other half of Apollo's twin flame, but where he blazes like the sun, she glows with cool defiance. She is beauty without vanity, strength without sound, and she will absolutely turn you into something if you step out of line. Her myths begin in tandem with Apollo's. Born on the remote island of Delos, Artemis arrives first and, in many versions, assists in her brother's birth. She's a goddess from her very first breath, untamed, untouched, and unrelenting in her demands. She asks Zeus for a few small favours: eternal virginity, silver arrows, a hunting dog pack, and a group of loyal nymphs to run with. Oh, and no marriage, ever. Zeus, in a rare moment of "sure kid, whatever you want," agrees. From that moment on, Artemis becomes the protector of young women and wild animals. She doesn't sit on Olympus sipping nectar. She roams the forests of Arcadia, crashing through underbrush, howling with wolves and hunting deer with the uncanny precision. Her nymph companions are bound to chastity, and she guards them fiercely. The rules are clear. No men, no distractions, no exceptions. Cross those lines? You don't get a warning. Just ask Actaeon, a mortal hunter who stumbles upon Artemis bathing in a secluded pool completely by accident. She turns, catches him staring, and without a word transforms him into a stag. Moments later, his own hunting dogs tear him apart, unaware they're chasing their master. It's brutal, but Artemis isn't the type to give lectures. She acts, instinctively, justice in motion. Or take Callisto, one of her nymphs. In some versions, she's seduced, or assaulted, by Zeus, disguised as Artemis herself. Callisto becomes pregnant. When Artemis finds out, she banishes her, her trust betrayed. Later, Callisto is turned into a bear, sometimes by Artemis, sometimes by Hera. Either way, she's hunted down, and only at the last moment does Zeus intervene, transforming her into a constellation, Ursa Major, the Great Bear. Her son, Arcus, becomes Ursa Minor. Both mother and child end up in the stars, forever circling the North Pole but never quite touching. Artemis's wrath isn't just for hunters and nymphs. Entire cities feel it. When the Greeks prepared to sail to Troy, Agamemnon, commander of the fleet, accidentally insulted Artemis by killing one of her sacred deer. Or maybe he just bragged about being a better hunter. Either way, Artemis was not amused. She calmed the winds, trapping the Greek fleet in harbour. To appease her, Agamemnon was told he must sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia. In some versions, he does. In others, Artemis swaps the girl out at the last second for a deer, whisking Iphigenia away to serve as a priestess. Whichever version you follow, Artemis makes it clear, her will isn't just a suggestion, it's law. Yet Artemis isn't cruel for cruelty's sake. She protects those who can't protect themselves. Young girls pray to her before their first steps into womanhood. Women in childbirth cry her name, even though she chose not to be a mother herself. She is the guardian of the vulnerable, the fierce protector of boundaries, and she has no interest in pleasing anyone. Here's something strange and wonderful. Artemis is one of the few Greek deities who remains consistent across most myths. She doesn't dabble in mortal politics, she doesn't sneak around in disguise. She knows who she is and what she wants. That makes her feel almost modern in a way, an eternal figure of autonomy. She doesn't have children, lovers, or throne room power games. What she has is space, and she demands it. Her sacred animal is the deer, and her temples are often set deep in the woods. The Brauronia, one of her major festivals, saw young girls in Athens dress as bears. Yes, literal bear costumes, and reenact myths tied to Artemis. It was both a rite of passage and a reminder that femininity wasn't just lace and perfume, it could be wild, dangerous, sharp. Scholars sometimes connect Artemis to older pre-Greek mother goddesses, forest spirits, and lunar cults. Her connection to the moon, more emphasised later than Cerulleus, links her to cycles, rhythms, transformation. When Selene and Hecate aren't available, Artemis becomes the goddess of moonlight, of night hunts, of cold silver guiding through darkness. But don't think she's isolated. Artemis has allies. She's tight with Apollo, though they've got serious sibling rivalry vibes, and occasionally she joins the wider pantheon for major events. Wars, weddings, celestial roll calls. But most of the time she's away, not banished, choosing to be elsewhere. She's always moving, always listening to the earth, her footfalls as quiet as snowfall on leaves. And if you happen to wander too deep into her forest, don't make a sound. Don't look too long, and definitely don't assume you're alone, because somewhere between the rustling leaves and the blink of moonlight on a blade, Artemis watches. She always has. You leave her domain changed, a little quieter, a little more alert. The wind is crisper now, the moon climbing higher behind the trees. You don't need to see her again to know she's still there, bow in hand, eyes sharp, waiting. You're still brushing leaves out of your hair from Artemis's forest when the ground starts to rumble. Not the deep, ancient quake of Poseidon's mood swings, but a kind of aggressive stomping, like someone's charging toward you in full bronze armour, with zero intention of stopping. That's your cue to back up. Fast. Because here comes Ares, god of war, bloodshed, and bad decisions, and he does not do subtle. He doesn't walk into a scene, he bursts into it. Helmet gleaming, cape fluttering unnecessarily, sword always a few inches too close to someone's face. If Athena is the cool-headed general who plans the war, Ares is the guy who headbutts the door before anyone has a strategy. You feel him before you see him, a pulsing surge of testosterone, the scent of iron and sweat, and just the faintest echo of war drums. Ares is one of those gods who always sounds impressive. God of War has a nice dramatic ring to it. But when you start reading the fine print, his reputation is complicated. To put it gently, the other gods do not like him, not even his parents. He's the son of Zeus and Hera, yes, but neither of them brags about it. Zeus calls him the most hateful of all the gods. Hera mostly sighs when his name comes up, like she's waiting for his arrest record to disappear from Mount Olympus HR. It's not that he's ineffective. Ares can wreck a battlefield. But he lacks finesse. He charges when he should wait. He escalates when he should negotiate. He's war without a cause, noise without victory. And the Greeks, they weren't big fans either. They respected his power, sure, but worshipped him reluctantly. Unlike Athena, who had temples and fan clubs, Ares' shrines were smaller, more private, often left a little dusty. He was necessary, not beloved. Still, he's not without his charms. Ares is dangerously attractive in that reckless, emotionally unavailable kind of way. Muscled, brooding, perpetually glaring into the distance like he's posing for a war god cologne ad. And let's be honest, plenty of mortals and gods find that whole vibe irresistible, including Aphrodite. Now that pairing is a mythological classic, Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, Ares, god of chaotic violence. It's a hot mess. They're not married, she's stuck with Hephaestus, remember? But their affair is open secret. Their chemistry is explosive and probably responsible for at least 5 natural disasters. They have several kids together, all predictably intense. Eros, aka Cupid, who spreads passion with arrow precision. Phobos and Deimos, personifications of fear and terror, who often ride into battle with their dad. Basically, the whole crew shows up when you want your enemies to cry before breakfast. The Ares-Aphrodite affair eventually blows up when Hephaestus crafts an invisible net to catch them in bed, literally, and exposes them to the entire Olympian court. It's less about revenge and more about public humiliation, which Hephaestus excels at. The gods gather, laugh, point Apollo jokes. Hermes says he wouldn't mind being in Ares' place. Everyone claps. Hera rolls her eyes. And Ares? He never really changes. He's embarrassed for about a minute, then goes right back to what he does best, wrecking things. On the battlefield, Ares is wild. He's not the god you pray to for victory. He's the god you curse when the battle drags on. He doesn't care who wins. He cares that there's conflict. He thrives on chaos. When Achilles and Hector clash in the Iliad, it's Ares who throws himself into the mix, picking sides, changing his mind, and getting wounded by Diomedes, a mortal, with help from Athena, who naturally delights in seeing him taken down a notch. That's the thing about Ares. He's powerful, yes, but beatable. He gets injured. A lot. He bleeds. He screams. At one point he runs back to Zeus to tattle on Athena for hurting him. Zeus just scoffs. "You're the one who loves war," he says. "What did you expect?" And Ares does love it. In Thrace, one of his main cult centres, he's worshipped as a savage war god, more akin to the chaos of battle than any tactical glory. He's also associated with certain animals, particularly vultures and boars, creatures that thrive off death or charge without thought. Even his sacred plants, like the blood-red anemone, grow where suffering lingers. But here's where it gets interesting. In Rome, Ares becomes Mars, and suddenly his whole reputation does a 180. Mars is noble, strategic. Kyriakos, the father of Rome through his sons Romulus and Remus. The Romans loved him, tied him to civic duty and empire. Same god, totally different PR team. Scholars still debate why. Was it just cultural preference, or did the Greeks invent a deliberately messy Ares to contrast their idealized Athena? Another fringe theory? That Ares originally represented an older, pre-Olympian type of masculine force, wild, untamed, tribal. He wasn't meant to be civilized. He was the fight before the rules were written. And once Olympus took over, he got painted as the problem child, still part of the family, but kept at arm's length. You hover now above a smoky battlefield, watching as Ares barrels through a line of warriors, armour dripping, eyes burning. He's unstoppable, but not invincible. There's no divine music here, no golden light, just grit, blood, screams, and a god who doesn't ask for loyalty, only rage. As the sun sets and the fighting slows, Ares walks alone through the field. He doesn't count victories, doesn't care who won. What matters is that someone fought. That's enough for him. And when you finally pull back, the smell of blood still lingering in your nose, you start to realize why the other gods avoid him. Ares doesn't care about order. He doesn't teach, he doesn't build, he destroys, and expects the world to thank him for it. You need a break from all that clanging metal and flying limbs, so you drift lower, out of the smoke of battlefields and into something warmer, quieter, and filled with the scent of molten bronze. You're in a forge now, tucked away inside a volcano. The air shimmers with heat. Sparks crackle in the gloom, and hunched over a massive anvil, soot-streaked and silent, is Hephaestus, the god of fire, metalworking, craftsmanship, invention, and really unfortunate family drama. He's not what you expect. No golden armour, no six-pack abs, no flowing hair. Hephaestus is stocky, limping slightly, one leg twisted since birth, or from being thrown off Olympus, depending on which version you believe. He's sweaty, scarred and focused. His hammer rises and falls in a rhythm older than Olympus itself. Bang, bang, bang. The sound is almost meditative, echoing through his lava-lit workshop like a heartbeat. Let's go back to the beginning, because for Hephaestus it starts rough. Some myths say he's the son of Hera alone, conceived without Zeus out of pure spite. When she saw that he was born lame, she hurled him off the Mount Olympus like a defective toy. He fell for a full day before splashing into the sea, where he was rescued by sea nymphs, usually Thetis and Eurynome. They raised him in a secret underwater grotto, where he learned to forge and build with fire and coral and submerged iron. In other versions, it's Zeus who tosses him, after Hephaestus sides with Hera during one of their many marital spats. Either way, the message is clear. Unwanted, cast out and scarred but never broken. Hephaestus spends years in exile, hammering, inventing, creating, and when he finally returns to Olympus, it's not with a vengeance, it's with craft. He sends Hera a gift, a magnificent golden throne. She sits in it. It locks around her like a trap. None of the gods can free her. They beg, they threaten, eventually they bribe. Dionysus gets Hephaestus drunken enough to come back and unlock the chair. Hera is freed, and Hephaestus takes his place among the Olympians, not with flair or fury, but with tools. His workshop is legendary. Automated bellows, golden mechanical assistants, giant anvils that shake the mountain with every strike. Hephaestus doesn't just forge weapons, he crafts wonders, shields etched with galaxies, armours that never dent, thrones that sing, and yes, Pandora, the first woman, built from clay by Hephaestus on Zeus's orders, shaped with precision and handed down with a sealed jar full of doom. Probably not his proudest moment. And yet, despite his genius, Hephaestus is rarely celebrated. The other gods barely tolerate him. They call him crippled, ugly, slow. But he builds their homes, crafts their weapons, repairs their tantrum damage. Zeus's lightning bolts, Hephaestus. Hermes' winged sandals, Hephaestus. Apollo's chariot, again, Hephaestus. Even the shields used in battle, crafted by his hand glowing with divine etchings. It's like being the IT guy of Olympus. No one thanks you until something breaks. His love life is frankly tragic. He's married off to Aphrodite, goddess of love, and the literal embodiment of unattainable beauty. The gods think it's hilarious. Aphrodite is not thrilled. She cheats on him with Ares, openly and often. And when Hephaestus catches them in that invisible net, he doesn't scream. He just exposes them, coldly, methodically. Let their other gods laugh. Let the betrayal hang in the air like smoke. It's not revenge, it's evidence. And then there's Aglaia, one of the charities or graces, goddesses of beauty and joy. After Aphrodite, some versions say Hephaestus marries her instead. A kinder match. A little peace, finally. No scandals, just shared silence, warm fires, and the clinking of cups. It's not a flashy romance, but maybe it doesn't have to be. Hephaestus's domain isn't just the forge, it's the transformation of violence into beauty, of pain into function. He's not the war god, but he builds the weapons. He's not the storm, but he makes the lightning. He's a creator in a pantheon obsessed with destruction, and maybe that's why he feels so alien among the rest. The Romans, by the way, called him Vulcan, and they kept a shrine for him outside the city walls, just in case. Fire gods made people nervous, too volatile, too close to chaos, and yet they were essential. No city without fire, no armour, no tools, no civilization. Worshipping Vulcan was both a necessity and a risk. If he was ignored, boom, forge fire, earthquake, cracking stone. Here's something fringe for you. In some obscure versions of the myths, Hephaestus creates a self-moving tripod, a robot basically, that serves nectar at banquets. Others say he built an entire army of bronze warriors to guard secret islands. One of them, Talos, patrolled Crete and could hurl boulders at ships. This is ancient tech mythology. Long before sci-fi, there was Hephaestus, dreaming up AI in a volcano. And while we're on the subject of his reach, Hephaestus wasn't just a divine metalsmith. He also taught mortals the craft of blacksmithing. In myth, he's credited with inspiring artisans, shaping civilization itself. Every hammer strike in every ancient workshop echoed with his legacy. Even today, the image of a firelit forge, a solitary figure hunched in flame and sweat, feels timeless. You hover beside him now as he wipes his brow, eyes focused, hands steady. He doesn't see you, doesn't care to. He's busy creating something that will probably be used by someone else, claimed by someone louder, someone taller, someone shinier, and he accepts that. Not with joy, but with a purpose. Because Hephaestus isn't here for praise, he's here for craft. And in that devotion, that quiet precision, he becomes something the other gods will never understand, indispensable. You're rising again, this time through the heat waves curling off Hephaestus's forge, up into a sky that glows faintly pink, as if the whole world is blushing. The wind carries something strange, soft laughter, the distant clink of jewellery, the vague scent of roses crushed under sandalwood. You're not sure if you're dreaming or being seduced by the air itself, and that's when you know Aphrodite is near. She doesn't appear so much as arrive, slowly, gracefully, like the tide rolling in on a calm day. Aphrodite doesn't stomp or shout or command storms, she just is, and everything else adjusts around her. The sea swells to match her mood. Birds sing in the right key, the breeze stops short of messing up her hair. You're not even sure she's trying, it's just physics reconfiguring itself in the presence of the goddess of love. Now, let's address her origins, because depending on which myth you read, Aphrodite either has the most poetic birth in mythology, or one of the weirdest. In the Homeric version, she's the daughter of Zeus and Dione, which is fine, bland even, but the earlier, Hesiodic version, far spicier. After Cronus chopped off Uranus's sky parts and hurled them into the sea, the foam bubbled and frothed. From that cosmic sea sizzle, Aphrodite emerged, fully grown, stunning, radiant. She stepped onto the shore, sea foam clinging like silk, and the world basically stopped to stare. The gods all wanted her. Immediately. No introductions necessary. But Zeus, perhaps sensing the chaos she would unleash, married her off to Hephaestus, thinking she'd mellow out with someone steady and unattractive. Spoiler, she didn't. Aphrodite's heart and her divine attention wandered, a lot. You probably know her best as the goddess of romantic love, but that's selling her short. She rules over lust, desire, seduction, beauty, fertility, and the raw, irrational decisions people make when their blood moves faster than their brain. She's the goddess of yes, I know this is a bad idea, but I'm doing it anyway. And while Eros, or Cupid if you're Roman, is often shown flitting around with his arrows, it's Aphrodite who hands him the targets. Her most famous affair? With Ares, of course. The god of war and shirtless overreactions. They're opposites, but somehow that makes it worse. Or better, depending on your definition of healthy relationship dynamics. While her husband Hephaestus toils in the forge, Aphrodite and Ares sneak off to passion-fueled rendezvous that eventually become the worst-kept secret in Olympus. Their children embody every messy side effect of love and war. Phobos, fear, Deimos, terror, Harmonia, harmony, and sometimes Eros himself. But Aphrodite's impact isn't confined to Olympus drama. Her influence spills over into the mortal world like spilled perfume. Sweet, dangerous, impossible to clean up. Take the judgment of Paris. A minor event, really. Just a golden apple tossed into a divine party by Eris, goddess of discord, with the inscription, "To the fairest." Instantly, 3 goddesses claim it, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. They find Paris, a Trojan prince with minimal qualifications, and ask him to choose. Each offers a bribe. Hera promises power. Athena promises wisdom. Aphrodite? She promises him the most beautiful mortal woman in the world, Helen. He picks Aphrodite, wins Helen, and thereby kicks off the Trojan War. 10 years, countless deaths. All because someone picked beauty over brains and empire. Classic. Aphrodite doesn't always cause disaster, just most of the time. Her powers can heal, inspire, and bind people together. In Cyprus and Cythera, her sacred islands, she's worshipped as a goddess of peace, fertility, and deep sensual connection. Offerings are made with flowers, doves, and incense. Temples aren't sequent, they're full of music and soft laughter, the hum of flirtation carried on the wind. But love in her domain isn't always tender. It's obsessive, possessive, and dangerous. Consider Pygmalion, a sculptor who carved the perfect woman from ivory and promptly fell in love with her. Aphrodite, amused and flattered, brought the statue to life. Great. Except now there's a living woman shaped entirely by someone else's fantasy. What could possibly go wrong? Or take Adonis, the mortal man so beautiful that Aphrodite herself fell in love with him. She kept him close, tried to protect him, even warned him against hunting dangerous beasts. Naturally, he went out, fought a wild boar, and died. Some say Ares sent the boar out of jealousy. Others say it was fate. Either way, Aphrodite wept, and from her tears and his blood grew the anemone flower, delicate, red, short-lived. Then there's Anchises, a Trojan shepherd whom Aphrodite seduced in disguise. When she revealed her divine form the next morning, he was terrified. She warned him not to tell anyone. He did. Zeus struck him with a bolt that either crippled him or knocked some sense into him. From their union came Aeneas, who would go on to found the Roman line. So yes, Aphrodite is literally the mother of Rome in that narrative. Here's a fringe fact that still stirs debate among scholars. Aphrodite may not have originally been a Greek goddess at all. Some theories trace her roots to the Near Eastern goddess Ishtar, or the Phoenician Astarte. Her older forms were fierce, combative, even bloody. Over time, she evolved into the more sensual, romantic version we know, but those early threads remain, especially in her connection to fertility, death, and rebirth. She's not just flirtation in a toga, she's the raw force of attraction that pulls stars into galaxies. And yes, she has her moments of pettiness, when a woman boasts about being more beautiful than her, cursed, when someone refuses love entirely, punished. Just ask Hippolytus, the son of Theseus, who rejected Aphrodite's power in favour of Artemis's chastity. Aphrodite didn't take it well. She arranged for his stepmother to fall in love with him, which, of course, spiralled into death, lies, and general Greek tragedy. You hover near her now, caught between awe and caution. Aphrodite doesn't feel like a goddess you worship with folded hands. She's the one you approach trembling, dressed your best, hoping not to say the wrong thing. She can grant desire or destroy you with it. Her smile is half invitation, half warning, and her eyes, they see right through you. Because in the end, Aphrodite isn't about love as safety. She's about love as power, as surrender, as the one force that gods and mortals alike can't resist, no matter how many times it ruins them. You feel a breeze now, sharp and playful, weaving between your fingers like it's trying to steal something before you notice. A feather flutters past, then another. Then there it is, a flash of wings, a blur of sandals skimming across the clouds. You look up just in time to see Hermes zip by, grinning, cloak snapping behind him like a flag. The moment you try to focus, he's gone. Of course he is. Hermes doesn't wait for anyone. He's the god of speed, travel, communication, commerce, thieves, boundaries, and for good measure, the dead. Because why not be the god of both tricksters and psychopomps? He's the ultimate multitasker. If Olympus had a group chat, Hermes would be the one sending memes, correcting typos, and showing up at your house 5 minutes before you even invited him. He's also the god of beginnings and endings, the liminal spaces, the thresholds of doors, the borders between countries, the pause between questions and answers. He's never still, ever. You try to follow him now, but every time you think you've caught up, he's already somewhere else, bartering with a fisherman or pickpocketing a king, or convincing a turtle to become a musical instrument. Let's rewind. His birth story already sets the tone. Hermes is born to Maia, a shy nymph who lives in a cave, and Zeus, of course, because it's always Zeus. Within minutes of birth, Hermes slips from his swaddling, toddles out of the cave, and steals Apollo's cattle. He does this by walking them backward to confuse the tracks, then invents fire so he can roast one and offer it to the gods. Then, feeling creative, he kills a tortoise, hollows out its shell, strings it with sheep gut, and invents the lyre. All before lunch. Apollo finds him, naturally furious, but Hermes, baby face and all, just plays the lyre and charms him into forgiveness. Not only does Apollo let the theft go, he gifts Hermes the caduceus, the famous winged staff entwined with serpents. Zeus watches this all unfold and is so impressed by Hermes' audacity that he makes him the official messenger god on the spot. Stealing cattle and inventing music somehow earns him a promotion. Classic Hermes. He becomes the go-to delivery guy for the gods, whether it's sending dreams, shuttling souls to the underworld, or carrying awkward breakup letters. He moves between realms with ease, Olympus, Earth, Hades, even the occasional divine council meeting that nobody else wants to attend. And no matter where he goes, he talks. Fast, a little too fast, but never without purpose. Hermes is also the protector of travellers, not just the heroic ones, but anyone on the road. Merchants, thieves, wanderers, diplomats. Crossroads are sacred to him, and ancient Greeks often left little stone piles, called Hermi, as offerings at intersections. He's the god of motion, yes, but also negotiation, trickery, the elegant twist of a phrase that turns a no into a definitely. And oh, does he love a good prank. One of his finest, convincing Io, yes, the cow-turned girl, to escape from Argus, the 100-eyed giant hero assigned as her bodyguard. Hermes approaches disguised as a shepherd, tells a story so long, so meandering, so boring, that Argus falls asleep with all 100 eyes closed. Hermes kills him, sets Io free, and casually walks away whistling. Later, Hera places Argus's eyes on the peacock's tail as a tribute. Hermes, he probably keeps the whole thing in his highlight reel. Despite all this mischief, Hermes isn't malicious. His tricks aren't cruel, they're clever. He's not trying to destroy the system, he's just making it more interesting. When he guides souls to the underworld, he does so gently. No dragging, no fear, just a hand on your back, a joke to soften the silence. He's the only Olympian welcomed both in the sky and below. Even Hades nods respectfully when Hermes arrives. And mortals, they love him. Sailors call on him for safe passage. Merchants pray for a good deal. Liars? Oh, they really love him. But so do athletes, inventors, messengers, diplomats. He's not one god. He's a god for everyone who has to move, to risk, to talk their way out of a bad decision. He is the divine embodiment of, trust me, I got this. And somehow he usually does. Hermes doesn't hold grudges. He doesn't chase glory. He doesn't need a palace or a throne. He's the breeze at your back, the nudge when you're stalling, the flash of inspiration right before you say something smart and pretend it was intentional. He's everywhere and nowhere, always 2 steps ahead. Here's a lesser-known story. Hermes once stole Poseidon's trident, Artemis's arrows, and Aphrodite's girdle, all in one afternoon. When the gods realized what had happened, they stormed into Zeus's court ready to demand retribution, only to find Hermes had already returned the items, replaced them exactly, and left thank you notes. He gets away with things because he respects the line he walks, even as he dances all over it. In another version of the myth of Persephone, it's Hermes, not Zeus or Demeter, who is sent to negotiate her release. And he succeeds, not with threats, but with reason. Calm, articulate, fair. That's Hermes. You may not always trust him, but you'd hire him in a heartbeat. The Romans worshipped him as Mercury, and the name stuck, speedy, slippery, essential. Even now, Mercury rules over Wednesday, just check the French, Mercredi. Governs communication and travel, and still crashes your internet when retrograde. You laugh, but somewhere Hermes is winking. Scholars often frame him as the ultimate liminal god, one who exists between spaces, in transition. That's why he feels so modern. He's not static. He reinvents, he adapts. In a world of absolutes, Hermes is movement itself. And now, just as suddenly as he arrived, he's gone again. You glance over your shoulder and spot a coin missing from your pocket. Your shoelace? Untied. But somehow there's also a new thought in your head. A solution to a problem you didn't know you had. Hermes doesn't always leave gifts you can see. Sometimes it's just that nudge, a whisper in your ear when you're stuck, telling you to take the leap, go the long way home, or say the thing you were too scared to say, because sometimes all it takes is motion. And Hermes, he's always moving. You've been riding the winds of Hermes for what feels like hours, zipping between myths like you're late to 12 different appointments. But now the pace slows. The air thickens with the scent of ripe grapes and something a little spicier. Maybe incense, maybe a hint of madness. The light is golden, but not the crisp sunlight of Apollo. This is warm gold, like candlelight after midnight. Music starts, pipes and tambourines, too many rhythms layered over each other. And then, finally, you hear the laughter. Loud, raw, wild. You're not in Olympus anymore. You're somewhere looser, weirder, and louder. You've wandered straight into the ecstatic domain of Dionysus. Ah, Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, theatre, fertility, transformation, and delightful chaos. He's the one Olympian who feels like he was created during a fever dream and then left unsupervised for too long. Unlike his more serious half-brothers and sisters, Dionysus doesn't ask for your respect. He wants your abandonment, your surrender. He wants you to drop whatever you think you are and become something else entirely. Let's start at the beginning, because like all gods worth their wine-soaked olives, Dionysus has multiple origin stories. One of the most popular says he's the son of Zeus and Semele, a mortal princess of Thebes. Hera, being Hera, isn't thrilled about yet another side romance, and pulls one of her classic tricks. She disguises herself as an old woman, and convinces Semele to ask Zeus to appear in his true divine form. Semele does, and Zeus, bound by a fatal promise, obliges. The result? Semele explodes in a blaze of thunder and glory, but the unborn Dionysus survives. Zeus sews him into his thigh and carries him to term. Yes, you read that right, his thigh. This is the kind of myth you can't make up, unless you're already a bottle and a half into your Dionysian ritual. Later, some versions say Dionysus is born a second time on Mount Nysa, hidden away from Hera's wrath and raised by the nymphs and satyrs, swaddled in ivy and tutored in pleasure. Other versions, even weirder. Some Orphic traditions claim Dionysus was the son of Zeus and Persephone, making him even more complicated. In that myth, baby Dionysus is torn apart by the Titans, cooked and eaten except for his heart, which Athena saves. Zeus swallows the heart and recreates Dionysus from it. So not just twice born, more like twice resurrected. Every version of his origin ends with the same theme, rebirth. Dionysus is transformation itself. As a god, he's constantly on the move. He wanders far beyond Greece, through Asia, India, the Near East, spreading the gift of wine and ecstasy and holy madness. But don't mistake him for a jolly drunk. Dionysus isn't about casual sipping on a veranda. He's about losing yourself, letting go of the ego. He can free you, or utterly unmake you. Both are forms of truth in his world. You find him now in the middle of a procession, surrounded by his ever-present entourage, Maenads, wild women in ivy crowns, dancing barefoot and frenzied, and satyrs, part man, part goat, completely inappropriate. They're singing, shouting, smashing pottery, and occasionally falling into each other's arms. This isn't just a party, it's a rite, a breakdown of the ordinary. The Maenads wield thyrsus, fennel stalks wrapped in ivy and tipped with pine cones, that double as both sacred instruments and makeshift weapons. And Dionysus? He's at the centre, of course. Tall, elegant, but always a little otherworldly. Sometimes youthful and beautiful, sometimes bearded and sombre. He shifts forms constantly. Man, animal, god, mask. You can't pin him down, that's the whole point. Here's a favourite story. Once, while travelling disguised as a mortal, Dionysus is kidnapped by pirates. They think he's just some wealthy noble and plan to ransom him. Big mistake. As the ship sails out, the sails fill with ivy, the mast oozes wine, and Dionysus transforms into a lion. The pirates leap overboard and are turned into dolphins, cursed to wander the seas forever. You know, standard Tuesday for Dionysus. He's also the god of theatre, and that might surprise you. Why the stage? Why scripted drama for a god of wild ecstasy? But it makes sense. Theatre is transformation. It's stepping into another role, wearing a mask to reveal a truth. Dionysus is the god of letting go, of playing, of living in the contradiction. In ancient Athens, his festival, the city Dionysia, featured days of plays, contests, parades, and wine-fueled debates. His presence was in every line, every costume change, every chorus shout to the sky, and yes, he's also deeply involved in madness. Not just the scary kind, though that's part of it, but the kind that frees you, the kind that cracks you open. Dionysus doesn't kill you. He unravels you, so you can be rebuilt. One of the most haunting examples, Pentheus, king of Thebes. He bans Dionysian rites, mocks the god, and spies on the Maenads. Dionysus lures him in, dresses him as a woman, and leads him to the mountains. There, in their frenzy, the Maenads mistake him for a lion and tear him apart, his own mother among them. When she realises what she's done, the spell breaks. Devastation follows. Dionysus doesn't just punish, he reveals. And this is where scholars get into the deep end. Dionysus isn't just a party god. He's a liminal figure, like Hermes. He blurs boundaries, male and female, life and death, mortal and divine, rational and ecstatic. In the Bacchae, Euripides shows him as both saviour and destroyer. Worship him and be free, defy him and be shattered. There's no middle ground. In some Orphic texts, Dionysus is linked to Zagreus, a child god dismembered and reborn, tied to resurrection and the afterlife. This connects Dionysus not only to wine and revelry, but to eternity. He shows up at the funeral as easily as he does at the feast. And there's more. He's sometimes shown descending into the underworld to rescue his mother, Semele. He brings her back, makes her divine, and gives her a seat on Olympus. Dionysus is one of the few gods who crosses into death and returns, not just once, but again and again, Every vine that dies and is reborn in spring, that's him. Every glass of wine raised in mourning or celebration, him again. You watch as the revellers dance on, eyes wide, mouths open in joy and horror. Dionysus doesn't want your obedience. He wants your honesty, your rawest self, the self you hide in daylight. He doesn't come to destroy rules, he comes to remind you they were never real. So maybe, just for a moment, you join the dance. Not forever, just long enough to lose your name, your role, your edges, because in Dionysus's world, letting go isn't weakness, it's divine. As Dionysus's echoing laughter fades into the wine-slick shadow bows of the forest, something changes. The trees begin to press closer together. The light turns strange, dappled and golden, like it's being filtered through dreams instead of branches. You hear something stirring, not like footsteps, but hooves, cloven ones. A flute begins to play, off-key, ecstatic, wild, and before long, the orderly mythological universe you've been mapping starts to unravel at the edges. You've crossed into the domain of Pan. You might think of Pan as minor, a fringe figure, literally on the outskirts of Olympus. But don't underestimate him. He's not flashy like Zeus, or eloquent like Hermes, or radiant like Apollo. Pan doesn't arrive, he's there. Always has been. He's the rustle in the reeds, the flicker in the corner of your eye, the beat of your heart when you realise you're alone in the woods. He's not polished. He's primal. Pan is the god of the wild, shepherds, flocks, and rustic music. But that's just the start. He's also the embodiment of raw nature, unfiltered instinct, and inconvenient urges. Half man, half goat, he walks upright, but his feet thud with ancient rhythm. He's got horns sprouting from his curly hair, a crooked grin on his face, and eyes that sparkle with mischief, and something a little unnerving. Born to Hermes, probably, and a nymph, though which one is up for debate. Pan caused his mother to flee the moment she saw him. Not a great start, but Hermes, bless him, scooped up his awkward little goat baby, wrapped him in a hare's pelt and brought him to Olympus, laughing all the way. Surprisingly, the gods didn't banish him. They loved him. Maybe because Pan didn't care about court drama or divine hierarchy. He just wanted to play his flute, chase nymphs and nap in sunlit groves. Speaking of flutes, the panpipes, or syrinx, are his invention. The story goes that he fell in love with a nymph named Syrinx. She ran from him, terrified, and when he finally caught up, she turned into reeds. Devastated, Pan cut those reeds and fashioned them into a set of pipes, because nothing says I miss you, like turning your crush into a musical instrument. You hear those pipes now, breathy, uneven, haunting. They're not Apollo's clean chords or Athena's calculated rhythms. Pan's music is messy, passionate, unrestrained. It doesn't follow rules. It follows feeling. That's why mortals feared hearing it at dusk. They called it panic, literally named after Pan. That sudden irrational terror that comes in the woods at night, when every twig snap sounds like something ancient waking up. That's Pan, whispering. Despite the fear, Pan isn't malevolent. He's just impulsive. He doesn't have schemes or prophecies. He has appetites for food, for song, for nymphs. His pursuit of love is often clumsy and aggressive, more about instinct than romance. And the stories don't shy away from how uncomfortable that can be. He's wildness personified, not a role model. He's desire without a filter, which can be liberating or terrifying depending on where you stand. Mortals worshipped Pan in the countryside, far from polished temples. His shrines were caves, groves, quiet clearings, where shepherds left bits of bread and wine. He was their protector, of goats, of flocks, of lonely travellers needing a tune in the dark. Pan didn't want gold or ceremony. He wanted you to acknowledge the earthy, messy parts of existence, the ones you try to dress up for city gods. In battle, Pan's powers were strange but effective. During the Battle of Marathon, some say he appeared to the Greeks and unleashed his panic shriek on the Persians, sending them into chaos. Afterward, the Athenians built him a shrine in a cave under the Acropolis, a rare moment of official recognition for the god who usually haunted the margins. He's also closely tied to Dionysus, often appearing in his revelling entourage, dancing, shouting, leaping across the forest floor with satyrs and maenads. But even among those wild things, Pan is wilder. He doesn't need wine to forget himself. He's the forgetting, the slipping of control, the freedom of the chase. Here's a quirky footnote from late antiquity. During the rise of Christianity, there was a strange rumour that the great god Pan is dead. Supposedly, a sailor heard it shouted from the sea. Scholars still argue about what it meant. Was it symbolic, a nod to the death of the old gods, or maybe a metaphor for the silencing of chaos, instinct and nature as more ordered religions took hold? Nobody knows, but the phrase stuck. And if Pan ever did die, he has left a ghost that hums in every forest and groan of the wind. Modern readers often reframe Pan as a symbol of nature itself, wild, endangered, potent. He appears in romantic poetry, weird dreams, fantasy fiction, and teenage notebooks everywhere. In some ways he's never been more alive. Maybe because we've never needed to hear his music more. Off-key, strange, alive. You watch him now, sprawled beneath an olive tree, chewing on a sprig of something unidentifiable, laughing at a joke no one else heard. The goats circle around him like bodyguards. The sun dips low. Another song begins, not meant for anyone but the trees. You realise this is his world. Always just beyond the edge of the path, always half hidden in the wild. Pan doesn't care if you understand him. He doesn't want prayers or praise. He wants you to remember what it feels like to be untamed, to run barefoot, to scream for no reason, to laugh until you forget your name. And as you step back into the tree line, feeling something sticky and sweet cling to your senses, you can't quite tell whether you've just met a god or just remembered something ancient you were born knowing. Either way, Pan is smiling. It's getting darker now, not the gentle lavender twilight of a countryside myth, but something deeper, denser. The wind has died. The trees no longer whisper. And every instinct tells you to walk carefully, to stop laughing, to avoid eye contact with anything that looks like it might move. You've left the world of nymphs and mischief behind. You're entering the land of monsters now, the outcasts of Greek mythology, born not to rule or inspire, but to haunt the edges of mortal courage and divine guilt. And if there's a unifying theme among them, it's this. Somebody up there messed up, and now you have to deal with it. Let's start with Medusa, arguably the most famous face in all of ancient horror, though you wouldn't want to look directly at it. She didn't start out as a monster. In fact, she was once a beautiful mortal priestess of Athena. But then Poseidon, yes, that Poseidon, violated her in Athena's temple. Instead of punishing Poseidon, Athena cursed Medusa, transforming her into a gorgon, hair of snakes, a gaze that turned men to stone, and a face that would make even her own reflection hesitate. The tragedy here is loud. A woman punished for her victimization, transformed into something feared and reviled. Still, she didn't hide. Medusa moved to a remote cave and made the best of a terrible hand. That is, until Perseus came along. Armed with Athena's shield, Hermes' sandals, and a shiny sword, he beheaded her, without ever looking directly at her, because even in death her gaze had power. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a golden-sworded warrior. Death becomes birth. In Greek mythology, that's practically a rule. And Medusa, she becomes both cautionary tale and feminist icon, a monster made, not born. Her image later appears on shields and buildings, not as a warning, but as protection. The Gorgon's face warded off evil. The thing once feared becomes the thing that keeps danger away. But she's just one among many. Let's talk the Minotaur. Half man, half bull, all tragedy. Born of Queen Pasiphae and, well, a divine prank gone wrong involving a wooden cow and Poseidon's weird sense of humour. When King Minos of Crete refused to sacrifice a sacred bull, Poseidon punished him by making Pasiphae fall in love with it. The result? A baby with a human body and a bull's head, raging and confused. Minos, embarrassed and terrified, commissioned Daedalus, brilliant inventor, poor father, to build the labyrinth. Not a maze, the maze, winding, shifting, unsolvable. The Minotaur was locked inside, where he fed on sacrificial youth sent from Athens every 9 years. That is, until Theseus arrived, sword in hand, string in pocket, and killed him with the help of Ariadne, Minos' daughter. Then he abandoned Ariadne on an island, because Greek heroes are nothing if not emotionally unavailable. The Minotaur wasn't a villain. He was a victim of divine politics and architectural cruelty. He didn't ask to be born or to be caged or to become a symbol of foreign monstrosity. But in myth that never really matters. Then there's Scylla and Charybdis, two nightmare neighbours. Scylla started as a beautiful nymph until she was cursed, either by Circe or by jealous gods, into a ravenous sea beast with 6 snapping heads. Charybdis, on the other hand, was a sea goddess who angered Zeus by flooding too many lands in her father Poseidon's name. He struck her down and turned her into a massive whirlpool that devoured ships. When Odysseus had to pass between them, he chose Scylla. She took 6 of his men, 1 for each head. Had he chosen Charybdis, he would have lost the whole ship. It's the origin of the phrase between a rock and a hard place, only the rock has teeth and the hard place drinks oceans. Greek monsters don't just attack from outside, sometimes they come from within. Like Echidna, the mother of monsters. She was half woman, half snake, and her children include most of the nightmare fuel we're covering. Cerberus, the 3-headed hound of Hades, the Chimera, a lion-goat snake fire-breather, the Hydra, a swamp serpent with heads that multiply when cut off, and Orthrus, a 2-headed guard dog, because 1-headed dogs apparently weren't terrifying enough. Oh, and let's not forget Typhon, Echidna's partner and arguably the most dangerous being the gods ever faced. A creature so vast his head brushed the stars, eyes burning, voices of 100 beasts roaring from his throat. He challenged Zeus for control of the cosmos, and for a moment he won, ripped out Zeus's sinews and stuffed him in a cave like leftover laundry. Only with Hermes' help did Zeus recover, regroup, and strike back with thunderbolt fury. Typhon was defeated and buried beneath Mount Etna. The volcano's eruptions, just him still writhing. And yet, even with all these terrors, not every monster in Greek myth is evil. Some are misunderstood, some are protectors. Cerberus, for instance, doesn't hunt. He guards. Loyal to Hades, he ensures the dead stay put and the living don't wander in. He's more bouncer than beast. Even the Sphinx, who devoured those who failed her riddle outside Thebes, wasn't purely malevolent. She challenged mortals to think. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon and 3 in the evening? She wasn't just killing for sport, she was filtering for wisdom. Oedipus answered correctly, of course. Man, and the Sphinx threw herself off a cliff, which compared to the rest of his life was actually the least traumatic part of his story. Greek monsters often exist to test, to reveal, to transform. They're hurdles that mark the turning points in heroic journeys. Without them, there is no glory, no proof of virtue. They are chaos wrapped in flesh, meant to challenge the assumption that humans, or even gods, are meant to survive easily. And here's a scholarly twist. Some believe that many of these creatures reflect ancient fears of the unknown. Strangers, disease, childbirth, natural disasters. The monsters gave shape to what could not be explained. Better to fear a serpent with regenerating heads than the slow, invisible creep of plague. Now you find yourself in a shadowy corner of myth's labyrinth, surrounded by the ghosts of monsters. You hear the slither, the growl, the deep breath before the pounce. But you're not afraid, not exactly, because these beings, for all their violence and horror, were also truths, embodied. Flesh and blood metaphors for all the chaos, grief, and confusion the gods themselves refused to own. So maybe the monsters weren't the villains. Maybe they were just the ones honest enough to be ugly. You ease your way out of the shadowy tangle of monsters and myths, brushing past old bones and broken swords, and suddenly the air changes again, cooler, crisper, with the scent of salt and kelp riding a low breeze. There's water ahead, lots of it, but it's not calm, gentle lake water. This is the deep stuff. Endless swirling dark blue layered over black. It hums, it threatens, it beckons. You're now under the rule of Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, storms and horses, for reasons that feel a bit random but will make sense eventually. Poseidon doesn't just rule the sea, he is the sea. Not the tranquil shallows or those vacation poster beaches, he's the thrashing storm that snaps masts. He's the whirlpool that pulls down ships like they're skipping storms. He's the sudden wave that erases entire shorelines. You might call him moody, but it's more accurate to say that Poseidon is never in balance. He doesn't do moderation. He does rage, revenge, and occasionally beauty if it's wild enough. Let's rewind. Poseidon is the middle brother in the Olympian trio. Hades got the underworld, Zeus took the sky, and Poseidon landed the sea after they overthrew Cronus, their Titan father. It sounds like a fair deal until you realise Zeus basically rigged the draw. Poseidon's still salty about it, pun very much intended, and it shows His trident cracks rock, calls up tsunamis, and, according to at least one myth, helped create horses from sea foam, because of course, actually, let's talk about those horses. Poseidon's relationship with land animals is strangely intimate for a sea god. The Greeks credited him with inventing the first horse, Skyphios, after a failed attempt to impress Demeter. In that story, he chased her across the world, and to escape his advances, she turned herself into a mare. Poseidon, not one to be outmaneuvered, turned himself into a stallion and, well, the result was Arion, a magical talking horse. You're welcome, world. Poseidon is the archetype of the stormy uncle. He's powerful, absolutely essential to the functioning of the cosmos, but no one wants to sit next to him at divine brunch. He holds grudges like Olympic medals. You disrespect his temple. Earthquake. You don't sacrifice correctly. Drought. You beat his son in a contest. Hope you weren't attached to your ship. He's the divine embodiment of don't poke the bear, except the bear can flood your coastline and destroy your port city in one passive-aggressive wave. Take Odysseus. The guy just wants to get home from the Trojan War, but along the way, he blinds Polyphemus, Poseidon's Cyclops son. In response, Poseidon spends the next 10 years doing everything short of throwing literal sea monsters at the man. He sends storms, monsters, bad winds, inconvenient detours, even delays in customs. When Odysseus finally reaches Ithaca, it's not thanks to Poseidon, it's in spite of him. And yet Poseidon isn't all destruction. He's also creator, builder. The Greeks believed he raised entire islands from the sea. He's a protector of sailors when they misbehave. He's tied to fishermen, dockworkers, traders, and anyone whose life touches the ocean. Temples to him dot the coastline of ancient Greece, each one positioned so the waves could hear the prayers. In fact, his rivalry with Athena is rooted in a contest over patronage of cities. Athens, naturally, was the prize. Poseidon struck the Acropolis with his trident and produced a saltwater spring, cool, dramatic, and entirely useless. Athena, meanwhile, offered the olive tree. It was humble, practical, sustainable. The citizens chose Athena. Poseidon never forgot it. That rivalry tells you everything about him. He's not subtle. He doesn't want to be. When he gives, it's thunderous. When he takes, it's total. And when he's slighted, it's remembered for generations. Yet despite his temperament, Poseidon has his soft spots. His wives and lovers, for instance, are numerous. His most notable consort is Amphitrite, a sea goddess and one of the 50 Nereids. At first, she wanted nothing to do with him, so she fled to the far ends of the sea. Poseidon sent a dolphin after her. The dolphin pleaded his case so eloquently that she agreed to marry him. Poseidon was so grateful he immortalized the dolphin in the stars. That's how the constellation Delphinus came to be. So, somewhere under all that raging foam there's a flicker of romance, shaky but real. Together, Poseidon and Amphitrite had several children, including Triton, who is sometimes described as a merman, sometimes as a full-on sea god in his own right, blowing a conch shell to calm or stir the waves. Other offspring of Poseidon, all over the myth map. Some, like Theseus, were great heroes. Others, like Antaeus and Polyphemus, were monstrous. He sired giants, horses, nymphs, and kings. The man's family tree is less a tree and more a coral reef, dense, branching, and full of unexpected species. One of the quirkiest entries in Poseidon's mythos, his invention of the chariot, and not just any chariot, but one pulled across the sea by hippocamps, those half-horse, half-fish creatures that look like someone lost a bet with biology. He drives it like a boss, foam curling in his wake, dolphins flanking the wheels like outriders. The image is so potent, so theatrical, that even his most severe critics had to admit Poseidon knows how to make an entrance. Scholars often describe him as a second-order deity, meaning he didn't originally start in the highest rank of the pantheon. Some theories trace him back to earlier water deities from Mycenaean or even pre-Greek cultures. Others link him to earth gods, because earthquakes were as much a part of his domain as tides. The nickname Enosageos, Earth Shaker, wasn't metaphorical. He was literally believed to cause earthquakes with his trident just by jabbing the ground hard enough. And that brings us full circle. Poseidon is duality. He creates and destroys, he delivers and takes. He blesses ports, then sends them crashing into the sea. He's as loyal as a wave, fierce in protection, merciless in fury. You don't ask Poseidon for favours. You bargain. You offer. You pour hope. Now, As you stand at the edge of a windblown cliff, sea spray wetting your face, you hear it, the distant rumble, like thunder echoing underwater. Somewhere beneath the waves, Poseidon stirs. Maybe he's rising, maybe he's sleeping. Either way, he's always there, not watching, waiting. You linger on that sea cliff for a long while, watching the horizon shift from cobalt to silver, the stars starting to blink open one by one. The roar of Poseidon's surf still rumbles in your bones, but the tide is pulling back, drawing you somewhere older, colder, quieter. It's not silence you're heading into, more like absence. A pause, a space where sound dies before it can echo. You're descending now, not in a fall, but in a slow drift, like a feather dropped into darkness. There are no stars here, no sky, no wind, just shadow and stone. You've reached the underworld, and at its throne sits Hades. Let's clear this up from the start. Hades is not the devil. He's not evil. He doesn't cackle or tempt or twirl a moustache over brimstone. He doesn't even want your soul. He just keeps it. Neatly filed, eternally stored. Think of him as the universe's most responsible landlord, and the underworld as his heavily guarded, extremely somber storage unit for the dead. He doesn't make the rules, he just enforces them. Hades is the eldest of the Olympian brothers, technically. When the gods overthrew Cronus and divvied up the cosmos, Hades drew the short straw, the underworld. He didn't object, he didn't bargain. He just nodded and took the realm no one else wanted. That tells you everything you need to know. He's not dramatic, he's not bitter, he's inevitable. You walk carefully now through the gates of the underworld. The first thing you pass is Cerberus, that famous three-headed dog who guards the realm, ensuring no souls escape and no mortals enter. He growls, but not at you, just in general, probably dreaming about a snack he hasn't had in 3,000 years. Beyond him, the realm stretches out in layers, asphodel meadows where most ordinary souls drift, pale and forgetful. Elysium, for the heroic and blessed, green fields, endless music, a perfect breeze. And then there's Tartarus, the pit below the pit, where the truly cursed or monstrous are chained forever. Think titans, oath-breakers and hubristic inventors. If the underworld is a city, Tartarus is the subterranean maximum security zone. But Hades doesn't lounge among the damned. His palace stands somewhere deeper, built of obsidian and silence. There he sits beside Persephone, his queen. And their story, it's more complicated than any simple abduction narrative would have you believe. Here's the version you've probably heard. Hades saw Persephone, daughter of Demeter, and decided he wanted her. He kidnapped her, dragging her beneath the earth in his black chariot. Demeter, goddess of agriculture, went into mourning. Crops died, famine spread. Zeus eventually intervened, demanding Persephone's return. But before she left, Persephone ate a few pomegranate seeds. Eating food in the underworld binds you to it, so she had to stay for part of the year, usually a third or half, depending on the myth. That's why we have seasons. Demeter grieves while her daughter is away. But other versions give Persephone more agency. Some say she chose to eat the seeds. Others hint that she came to rule beside Hades not just as a prisoner, but as a queen in her own right. Stern, fair, and powerful. She's not just a kidnapped girl, she's a bridge between life and death. In this reading, Hades is not a villain, but a partner. Serious, respectful, always seated at a polite distance. And Hades himself? He doesn't leave the underworld. Like, ever. He has no temples, no public festivals, and very few myths where he plays a starring role. When he does appear, it's brief and businesslike, delivering a curse, granting a request, or quietly reminding someone that death isn't optional. He's the one Olympian who seems perfectly content to not be in the spotlight. And that makes him, ironically, one of the most human. One of the most interesting Hades appearances comes in the Orpheus myth. Orpheus, grieving the death of his wife Eurydice, ventures into the underworld armed only with his music. He sings so beautifully that Hades and Persephone agree to release Eurydice, on one condition. Orpheus must not look back until they reach the surface. Naturally, he looks. Naturally, she vanishes. Hades doesn't curse him, doesn't punish, he just lets the law hold, no exceptions. Hades is also sometimes confused with Pluto, a Roman name that eventually became associated with wealth, because all precious metals come from underground. Over time, Hades shifts from ruler of the dead to god of hidden riches, though he never really loses that shadowy vibe. Gold, after all, is just light buried in the dark. There's a weird and delightful fringe theory that Hades is actually one of the fairest of the gods. He doesn't cheat. He doesn't seduce mortals in the form of swans or golden showers. He stays in his realm, follows the rules, and ensures the universe keeps turning. Without him, the cycle breaks. Life ends, and nothing waits on the other side. In that sense, Hades is not death. He's what comes after. He doesn't chase souls. He receives them. And people did pray to him, but carefully, quietly, sometimes using euphemisms like the unseen one. Offerings were left at night, buried or whispered. No statues, no loud hymns, just a nod to the inevitable. You walk the halls of his palace now, your footsteps echoing through centuries of silence. You half expect him to appear in full regalia, helmet of invisibility, black robes, flaming torches, but he doesn't. He's already here, has been the whole time. Hades doesn't need to announce himself. He's the god who knows you'll find your way to him eventually. And when you do, he'll greet you not with cruelty but with a ledger and a seat. He'll ask your name, your life, your regrets. Then he'll file them away, one more soul in the great cosmic archive. No tears, no fury, just order. Because that's what Hades offers. Not punishment, not pain, but structure. A place for everything that no longer has a place. In a pantheon full of chaos, he's the quiet at the end of the song. You leave the stillness of the underworld slowly, like peeling yourself away from a long, dense sleep. It's not unpleasant, just thick, like syrup or smoke. But once you rise, once the shadows slide off your skin, the world above feels brighter, too bright, as if someone turned the sun up too high and didn't bother warning anyone. Everything smells like wildflowers and honey, and the vague whiff of divine arrogance. You've reached Mount Olympus itself, finally, and this is where the gods live. Not dwell. Live. Lavishly, pettily, loudly. It's a place not built but shaped by storms, ambition, and pure drama. The palace gleams with impossible light. The floors are marble, but not the cold museum kind. This stuff glows softly beneath your feet like it's inhaling light. Columns soar into the clouds, and golden walls are trimmed with living ivy, because even opulence here comes with a hint of chaos. At the highest point of Olympus sits Zeus, king of the gods, stormbringer, thunderchucker, infamous womanizer, patron saint of do as I say, not as I do. You spot him lounging on his throne, beard immaculate, lightning bolt leaning casually against the armrest like it's a conversation piece. His eagle watches you with a stare that says, "Don't even think about touching anything." This is the big guy, the CEO of the divine corporation, and yet somehow he still looks like he's one bad question away from a full-scale tantrum. Zeus didn't just get here, he fought for it. Born to Cronus and Rhea, he was the youngest of the original Olympian siblings. Cronus, paranoid thanks to a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, swallowed each baby whole, just popped them into his stomach like stress gummies. When Zeus was born, Rhea finally snapped. She hid him in a cave on Crete and tricked Cronus by feeding him a rock wrapped in swaddling cloth. Cronus, proving that parenting standards among Titans were low, didn't notice. Zeus grew up in secret, probably raised by divine goats and shield-banging nymphs, depending on which version you read. Once grown, he forced Cronus to vomit up his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Fully grown and ready to rebel, together they waged the Titanomachy, a decade-long war against the old gods. When it ended, the Olympians stood victorious. Zeus took the sky, Poseidon the sea, Hades the underworld. The rest scattered across Olympus, founding a pantheon that would define Western imagination for millennia. Zeus's power isn't just physical, though the whole lightning bolt from nowhere thing helps. His real strength lies in control, laws, oaths, hospitality, storms and kings and contracts. His will is basically the Wi-Fi of the universe. When he's in a good mood, everything connects smoothly. When he's angry, nothing works. But let's talk about the affairs, because Zeus has more romantic conquest than anyone really asked for, and it's a critical part of his mythology. His wife is Hera, queen of the gods and professional grudge holder. And yet, despite that extremely high-profile relationship, Zeus spends much of his divine calendar year shape-shifting into animals or clouds or golden rain in order to seduce, or sometimes assault, mortal women. His partners include Leda, as a swan, Danae, as golden light, Europa, as a bull, and Io, as a literal cloud chaser. From these liaisons come a lineup of god-tier demigods: Heracles, Perseus, Helen of Troy, Minos, Dionysus. It's like Zeus was running his own exclusive genetic experiment on divine heroism. Scholars have long debated whether these stories were mythological metaphors for conquest, weather phenomena, or just excuses to fold regional cult heroes into a pan-Hellenic narrative. Either way, it's a mess. And Hera, she rarely punishes Zeus directly. Instead, she takes it out on the women, or their children. Heracles, for instance, is famously hounded by Hera from birth to death, despite being one of Zeus's favourites. It's petty, it's cruel, it's also very on brand. Olympus isn't built on justice, it's built on politics. Now, despite his moral shortcomings, which, let's be honest, are plentiful, Zeus is often invoked as the ultimate authority. His judgment ends disputes among gods. His nod grants legitimacy to kings. His eagle is the divine equivalent of a presidential seal, and his temples, like the one at Olympia, were colossal centres of worship and ceremony. In oracles, particularly at Dodona, his messages came through rustling oak leaves and murmuring doves. He wasn't just thunder and fury, he was the sky itself. Infinite, unpredictable, inescapable. One, a strange fringe theory, that Zeus originally began not as a thunder god, but as a sky child, a divine youth, associated with seasonal rebirth, later folded into the more patriarchal figure of the ruler. Another holds that he and Dyaus Pitar, the Vedic sky god of early Indo-Europeans, are the same root deity, meaning Zeus may have cousins stretching all the way to India. The cloud throne has long legs. Olympus, for all its power and pride, is not peaceful. The gods squabble constantly, sometimes with words, sometimes with curses, sometimes with full-on wars that involve mortals as pawns. It's more dysfunctional family than divine court. Imagine a soap opera, but everyone's immortal and has a superweapon. Still, when they gather in the Great Hall, 12 thrones, golden goblets, ambrosia flowing like wine, muses humming soft tunes from the balcony, it's hard not to be awed. This is the nucleus of the Greek mythological universe. All roads lead back here, sooner or later. And Zeus, for all his flaws, sits at the centre, not because he's the wisest, or the kindest, or even the strongest, but because he's there, at the axis, the fulcrum between heaven and earth, fate and free will, law and chaos. You step back, feeling the pressure of Olympus in your bones. It's not just altitude, it's hierarchy. Up here, the gods aren't just bigger. They're louder, grander, hungrier. And Zeus, he's watching even when he's pretending not to. And somewhere storm clouds are already forming, because when Zeus rests, he dreams of lightning. You slip away from Olympus before the thunder gets personal. Not that you've done anything wrong, probably, but the thing about Zeus is that guilt is flexible, and storms are fast. So you follow a gentler trail now, winding down the backside of the mountain where the light softens, the laughter fades, and the scent of olive trees and roasted barley hangs warm in the air. There's a little stone hearth ahead, smoke rising in a perfect spiral. A woman is tending it, not loud, not glowing, not flanked by creatures or symbols. She's there, steady, silent, unnoticed. This is Hestia, and she's been waiting this whole time. Hestia is the goddess of the hearth, home, domestic life, hospitality, and ritual flame. She's not flashy. She doesn't hurl weapons or seduce mortals or unleash plagues. In fact, there are very few myths where she even speaks, and yet, without her, the entire divine ecosystem collapses. Because while the others demand worship, Hestia is the one who receives it first. Every sacrifice starts with her. Every flame begins at her hearth. She was the firstborn of Cronus and Rhea, making her technically the eldest Olympian. But she was also the last to be freed from Cronus' stomach, since she was the first swallowed. The paradox suits her, first and last, alpha and omega. She exists at the centre of things and at their quiet conclusion. She doesn't need to dominate the scene, she is the scene, the fire that cooks your food, the warmth that keeps you from freezing, the space that turns a building into a home. When the Olympians set up shop on Mount Olympus, each demanded a throne, except Hestia. She declined hers, offered it up to Dionysus, depending on the version, choosing instead to tend the hearth at the centre of the hall. Think about that. While the others were arguing over the rank and seating charts, Hestia was building the house, Literally. Her fire burned at the heart of the palace, eternal and undisturbed. She didn't need elevation to have importance. She was the foundation. Her temples were different too. No massive statues, no grand altars, no dramatic carvings of monsters slain or lovers wooed. Just a fire, always lit, fed with offerings of oil, bread and prayer. In every Greek home a small flame was kept in her honour. When colonists left to found a new city, they carried fire from her hearth to kindle the one in the new settlement. She was the divine spark of civilization, passed like a torch from generation to generation. And while her siblings bickered and battled, Hestia made a conscious choice to remain above the fray. Both Poseidon and Apollo pursued her once, but she declined. Politely, firmly, forever. She swore an oath to remain a virgin goddess, like Athena and Artemis, and Zeus honoured that vow by giving her a unique position, respected by all, disturbed by none. You might be wondering why she's not part of more stories, why she isn't invoked in epics or tragedies, but that's the trick. Hestia's importance doesn't need a plot. She is the background, the ritual, the part of life that's so consistent, so essential, that it disappears into normalcy. Until it's gone, and then, oh, do you notice? In public life, Hestia was the glue of community. In cities like Athens, her hearth burned in the Prytaneum, the civic building at the heart of governance. Any official business began with offerings to her. Guests were received in her name, exiles who touched her hearth were granted protection. She wasn't just the goddess of literal fire, she was the goddess of belonging. It's easy to overlook her. In fact, she was eventually removed from the canonical 12 Olympians by some accounts, replaced by Dionysus, not out of anger, not due to scandal, just because she let them. Stepped aside. Even then, her flame kept burning. You can leave the party and still be the reason it started. Modern scholars sometimes call her the invisible goddess, but that invisibility isn't weakness. It's choice. A power so intrinsic it doesn't need to prove itself. She didn't need thunderbolts or fanfare. She had continuity. While Zeus changed lovers, Athena waged strategy, and Ares ran off to start wars, Hestia remained. Always present. Always burning. The quiet core of a chaotic world. One obscure but intriguing fact. In Roman tradition, her equivalent was Vesta, and her priestesses, the Vestal Virgins, were some of the most powerful women in the empire. They kept the sacred fire burning in the temple of Vesta, and if it ever went out, it was a national emergency. Their purity wasn't just symbolic, it was essential to the survival of the state. Hestia's legacy didn't disappear, it deepened. And here's where the open debate sneaks in. Some historians argue that Hestia was originally the chief deity of the household, and even the state, before the male-dominated Olympian hierarchy took over. In pre-Hellenic cultures, the hearth was the centre of life. Hestia, in that view, wasn't marginal, she was central. The later myths may have pushed her to the background, but only because the background is where she belongs. You sit with her now, near that crackling flame, and she says nothing. She doesn't need to. The warmth is enough, the smell of baked bread, the low hum of safety. It's not exciting, maybe, but it's real. You realise slowly that all the quests and catastrophes and divine melodrama don't matter without a place to come back to, without a hearth, without Hestia. She smiles at you, not wide, not dazzling, just a small, knowing upturn of the lips, as if to say, you'll understand eventually. Then she returns to her fire, adjusting the logs, her hands steady, practiced. Because someone has to keep the flame alive while the rest of the world burns. You leave Hestia's hearth slower than you expected. There's a pull in that warmth, a safety you don't realise you've been craving after all that divine noise and monster shrieking, and general cosmic absurdity. But the journey isn't quite over. There's one more stretch of road to walk, one more group of figures to meet. They're not gods exactly, not monsters, not even heroes. They exist outside the rankings, outside the squabbles. They don't demand worship or build temples. They just are. Unbending, unyielding, ancient even to the gods. You're walking now toward fate. The Greeks called them the Moirai, the Fates. 3 sisters who control the thread of every life. You might be picturing kindly old women, the sort who offer you warm soup and unsolicited advice. And yes, they're usually depicted as elderly, but don't let that fool you. These are not your grandma's knitting club. These are the weavers of reality. The first sister is Clotho. She spins the thread of life, twisting it between her fingers from nothing into something. Every birth, every beginning, every first breath starts with her. She decides when life begins, not arbitrarily, but with purpose. You are made by Clotho, whether you know it or not. Next is Lachesis, the measurer. She determines how long that thread should be, how much time you get, not based on merit or charm, or how many times you remembered to floss, just because. She stretches the line, measures it with her rod, and cuts no corners. She doesn't explain, she doesn't argue. And finally there's Atropis. She holds the shears. When the time comes, no matter how unfair, how early, how tragically soon, she cuts the thread. No hesitation, no reversal. Not even Zeus can interfere. Atropos doesn't care who you were or what you still had planned. When she snips, it's over. Your name disappears into silence. The fates aren't cruel. They're not even emotional. They don't laugh at your pain or cry at your triumphs. They are mechanical, eternal, deeply intimate, and entirely impersonal, and that's what makes them terrifying. You can plead with the gods, you can sacrifice to Poseidon or charm Aphrodite or try to outfox Hermes. But the fates? There's no prayer strong enough, no bribe large enough. Their work doesn't bend, it simply is. They don't live on Olympus. They exist somewhere else. Sometimes said to dwell near the edge of the world, sometimes beneath the earth. Some myths claim they're daughters of Nyx, the primordial night. Others say they're offspring of Themis, divine order, and Zeus himself, though even he can't overrule them. If the gods are the actors on the stage, the fates are the playwrights. Or worse, the stagehands. They don't need applause, they just make sure the lights go out on cue. You see them now, not quite human, not quite divine. Sitting at an old three-legged loom, Clotho spinning, Lachesis measuring, Atropos sharpening her shears, her eyes half-lidded like she already knows how this ends. Their movements are slow, deliberate. There's something deeply final about every gesture. It's not just mortal lives they handle either. Gods have threads too, thinner, longer, harder to break, but threads nonetheless. The Titans fell, so did heroes, so will kings and cities and civilizations, all woven and cut by the same hands. Atropos doesn't flinch. One of the stranger footnotes in Greek tradition is that some cults believed you could influence the fates, just a little, with offerings, with rituals, with precise whispered prayers, but even these hopeful hacks were surrounded by a shrug. Most Greeks understood that fate wasn't meant to be avoided, it was meant to be faced. You think now of Oedipus, doomed by prophecy, trying to escape his fate only to run straight into it. The irony isn't that he failed to avoid destiny, it's that he thought he could. In Greek myth, tragedy doesn't come from darkness, it comes from resistance, from imagining you're immune. Even the gods know better. They may rage, bargain, even hide, but in the end, they all acknowledge the thread. Some scholars argue that the fates were the Greeks' way of making peace with the uncontrollable. They lived in a world full of plagues, earthquakes, war, and famine. Believing in the fates gave shape to chaos. A plan, even if it was an unforgiving one. Others see them as metaphors for time. Birth, life, death, past, present, future. In every reading, though, they remain untouched by the mess below. They never trip over their own threads, they never miss a stitch. Now, as you sit quietly watching the loom, you wonder about your own thread. Clotho already spun it. Lachesis has long been measuring. And Atropos? She hasn't moved yet, but her fingers twitch. You can't stop her, but you can decide what you do while your thread is still uncut. The Greeks understood this. That's why their heroes were so obsessed with the kleos. Glory, memory, reputation. You may die, you will die. But if you lived boldly, your name might stay woven into other stories. That was the only kind of immortality available to mortals. So maybe that's the gift the fates offer. Not control, but clarity. The understanding that time is finite, that every step matters, that the gods can throw lightning and monsters and irresistible love into your path, but the thread, that's yours, to walk, to tangle, to follow. As you rise and step away from the loom, you feel the weight of it. Not fear exactly, but awareness. A pulse in your fingertips, a thread between your ribs, still uncut, still yours. And you walk on, not toward a new god or shrine or myth, but simply forward, because there's nothing more divine or more human than living under the watch of the fates and choosing to move anyway. And now, here you are, back where you started. Only it's not really the same place, is it? You've slipped through the threads of time and myth, rubbed elbows with immortals, wandered through olive groves and underworld shadows, and somewhere along the way, you've changed just a little. Greek mythology does that to you, not with brute force, but by gently folding your understanding of the world into something more tangled, more poetic, and weirdly more real. Because when you think about it, these stories aren't just old, they're alive. They whisper through our language, peek out from the margins of books and movies, and sometimes crash the party wearing nothing but a lightning bolt and questionable morals. Every time you hear someone call something a Pandora's box, or say Achilles' heel, or mention titanic things, or muses, or narcissists, or Herculean tasks, you're standing in the aftershock of a myth. These characters don't just belong to temples and scrolls, they've been living rent-free in our heads for thousands of years. And sure, they're flawed. Oh boy, are they flawed. The gods are impulsive, petty, jealous, moody, and absolutely exhausting at times. But maybe that's why they've stuck around. They're not just powerful, they're relatable. They make terrible decisions, fall in love with the wrong people, get tricked by mortals, and hold grudges longer than entire empires last. They're like us, only shinier, louder, and capable of turning into birds when cornered. Even the monsters, the outcasts, the background players, they all leave a mark. Greek mythology doesn't waste space. Every story, no matter how small, folds into the bigger mess. And isn't that comforting in a weird way? That even if you're not the chosen one with a golden sword and a tragic prophecy, you're still part of the narrative, still threading through something ancient. So maybe the real magic isn't in the lightning bolts or magic helmets or labyrinths. Maybe it's just in the remembering, in the fact that you sat here, let your mind wander across the dusty hills of Hellas and listened. That's the oldest kind of worship there is. Now, let the myths fade out like an old lyre cord plucked one last time. The gods have wandered off to squabble elsewhere, the monsters have curled up in their caves, the heroes are resting their sore knees, and the fates? Well, they're always watching, but they're giving you a moment, a pause, a breath. So let your eyelids drift lower, let your mind stay soft. The myths will still be here when you wake, waiting.